I call the advisory committee meeting for February 10th, 2022 to order at 7:00 p.m. This meeting is being held remotely as an alternate means of public access pursuant to Chapter 20 of the Acts of 2021, temporarily amending certain provisions of the open meeting law. You are hereby advised that this meeting and all communications during this meeting may be recorded by the town of Hingham in accordance with the open meeting law. If any participant wishes to record this meeting, please notify the chair at the start of the meeting in accordance with Mass General Laws, Chapter 30A, Section 20F, so that the chair may inform all other participants of said recording. Is anyone else recording the meeting this evening? Okay. Are there any comments from the public regarding items not on the agenda? Not seeing any hands. Okay, so first big order of business tonight is the Weir River Water System budget. And I'm really excited to go through this and have Russell Tierney here with us tonight. Thank you very much for joining us, Russell. And he's the superintendent of the Weir River Water System. And this is Evan's budget. So I'll send it over to you, Evan.
Oh, thank you so much, Julie. This was the surprise budget of my evening. And again, Russ, apologies for the nobody reaching out to you about this.
Russell there?
Yeah, he is. Well, maybe
Okay.
he stepped away. Maybe he stepped away for a minute.
Okay.
His logo is up.
Yeah.
I'm here, sorry.
Oh, that's okay. Just wanted to make sure.
Yeah, I was on the phone with the town administrator from Cohasset, sorry.
Oh, okay.
Oh,
Okay.
that's what she said. I'm good.
Okay.
Now, Nancy, are you going to flash this on up? Or?
I am, but can you give me 2 seconds? I apologize.
Sure. So I'll just give it. I spoke to Russell. Dave and I spoke to Russell. I would say, what was it, mid-December, Russ? It was a while ago. On this budget, and this is one of those budgets that is paid by ratepayers, similar to HMLP, and not entirely similar, but close enough to South Shore Country Club. So there are no implications on the actual town budget from Russell's budget. And while we're waiting for it to come up, of note, Russ has done a neat job this year kind of breaking out and being more specific around the capital improvement projects that he's doing and undertaking, and sound like they were desperately needed based on the ownership transition that's gone on. So Russ, anything else you want to highlight about the budget? I know you've been very diligent in being proactive about maintenance and deferred maintenance that you're trying to take care of. And hopefully we don't have an incident like Huntington Ave in Boston with those 35-foot gushers of water.
I'll say that we'd be very excited about those things. I did find out some very interesting information today about a main that's under a seawall. So
That's right. That's right.
I'm panicking again, but that's okay. I'm good. As far as the maintenance goes, yeah, we've been doing a lot of maintenance work. Sue and I worked really hard on the budget this year, this our second fiscal year, to break it down even more into some categories like hydrant maintenance and vehicle maintenance and things like that. So what was a broad spectrum of one job number is now, I'll call it account number, is now like going to be like 6 or 7 account numbers. So we can more, better track what we're doing in certain areas of the system, so we know where, the more money might need to go or more money has gone. So that's what we did for this year. As far as the capital improvements go, we have done a lot of capital improvement work, water mains and things like that. We do have a few things at the plant that are starting to become an issue, to where we're going to have to start talking about replacing some very expensive pieces of equipment. But again, we have the capital money, and as far as the water system goes, it is taking care of itself. It's the money we're getting for revenue is keeping the budget very healthy, so we're doing fine.
And Nancy, could you just, just as we kind of go through it, because it is a budget that's ultimately zeroed out by what is charged to the ratepayers, there were, as we were talking through some of the proactive improvements that Russ is trying to get ahead of, they're in here somewhere. And
Sorry.
That's all right. All right.
I think it's in his presentation, right?
Okay. Yes. probably. Yeah, actually, what
Do you
can we
want to
do
go
this?
through, Russ, do you want to go through this whole presentation?
Yeah,
Absolutely.
we don't, we
5
can touch
minutes.
on the highlights.
Yep,
Yeah.
it'll take me 5 minutes anyways. You can go to the second page.
Okay.
Basically our mission and service is not going to change. It's the same it's always been. Bottom line is keep the system up and running, keep making improvements, and just find the best quality water to all the customers of the 3 towns that we service, and make sure we stay on the capital improvements that are very much needed for the town and the towns and the water system in general, and just stay on top of that. Good. You can go to the next slide. Our benchmarks, we treat over 1.2 billion gallons of water every year. We maintain over 190 miles of water main. I can't even tell you how many fire hydrants we have. I can tell you it's 917. We're going to maintain the fire hydrants, exercise gate valves, hydrant replacement. Hydrant replacement is a big thing in the town. All the towns, I keep saying the town, is a big thing in all of Weir River water. We are making a very conscious effort to replace fire hydrants as often as possible because they are aging and they're the most important thing in the water system for us to flush out the system in the fire department to use for fighting fires. We're going to continue with our flushing program. We may put the spring one on hold due to we have a centrifuge that went down, so it's going to really hamper our sludge removal process. So we are getting that repaired right now, but we may have to not flush it so we can give the other centrifuge a break.
Did you? Are there 3 centrifuges that you would?
There are only 2. The problem is it was designed for 3. They only installed 2, but as we go with the capital improvements, we are definitely going to buy 2 new ones, but they're going to do 1.5 times the amount of sludge. So it'll be like having 3. They're more efficient. They're a lot more energy efficient and things like that. So that's what we're looking on for FY24.
Okay. Right.
You can go on to the next one.
Yeah.
Key initiatives, we're going to improve water quality by implementing programs that we're working on, keep up with the water main replacement program. We are continuing with water treatment plant upgrades. Some of the chemical feed systems have got fixed the first year. We've fixed a few more this year. We are starting a very intensive GIS, GPS, and capital improvement program. So Lonnie, who is the new GIS director in town, is moving over to DPW to work with Randy and I in engineering with JR. And we're going to really improve the GIS systems that the town has. So we're really going to make real improvements there because it really helps us with a lot of different things, tracking and things like that, all the infrastructure in our assets. We're going to utilize GIS system for asset management, like I said. We are currently looking at a new water storage tank design and construction over the next 2 years. I get into that a little bit more at the end. We're going to implement the capital study program, which implementation of the capital study program, which is due around April 1st. I do have sections of that, and I have been reviewing it as they've been doing it. And it's laying out pretty well for how we laid out the entire system and how much money the town would have to invest. So it's a really good study, and it's going to be very helpful to the future. And equipment upgrades. We're going to continue with equipment upgrades because newer equipment takes less maintenance, and some of the equipment at the plant is like 30 to 40 years old. So it's time to start updating some of that equipment. Good.
All right, next one.
So basically right now, the Weir River Water System has 1 full-time person, that's me. We are going to have a part-time administrative assistant starting on July 1st. We're going to actually hire a full-time person and share that person between Weir River Water and the town's engineering department. The JIS coordinator, Weir River pays 25% of that position. Seasonal inspector right now, we have not done that yet. So we are talking with DPW to possibly hire a person that will inspect all of our capital work. So we may share that cost because it's probably much less expensive than hiring the engineering companies to do it. And to be honest with you guys, the engineering companies are having trouble finding people to fill those positions. So it's time that we think to bring someone in-house at the town. So once Randy comes back, we're going to start working on that together. Contract operations currently for the first 5 years, they have 3 employees in management supervisor oversight, 6 employees, actually it's 5 employees at the plant. We are adding a 2nd employee at the plant. We had a lot of discussions with Suez, and the plant needs some care. So we decided to bring on an extra person, but what that person is also going to do is eliminate the need for outside contractors to do some of the mowing that we do and some of the landscaping work that we do around the plants and the pump station. So that person will also do that work. So it's definitely a savings for everybody to bring in another person. And then 5 employees in the distribution system doing maintenance. So basically in the enterprise fund budget is $257,380 in salaries. Contract services is about $5.1 million. Property taxes to all the towns where we own land is about $980,000. Other expenses is $583,000, which includes repairs, details, hydrant replacements, all those things that we do in the water system. And then our debt services, long-term and short-term debt is about $6 million. Any questions? No? We good?
Really?
You want more?
Yeah, I'm like, I can't believe there's no questions.
Well,
Okay.
you just give us a second to collect our thoughts and
Process.
process.
I can't, oh,
Wait, I'm seeing, sorry, Andy,
Andy, yeah. Chris, yeah.
Andy, go ahead. Andy, you're on mute. Okay.
This is a question I asked the fire department, Russell, and essentially it was suggested that maybe I should ask the water company. And the question arises out of the fact that the fire department budget for water is, I think, $11,000. And by contrast, the sewer department, I think, is 16,000, and the socio country clubs, 14,000, something like that. And my question is, I guess I just don't understand the system. I assume the pipes that run to the hydrants are full all the time, right? And so I'm wondering why so much usage.
So I'd have to look at what their budgets are for. Is it for the potable water? Because, we have quite a few fire stations in town. Social Country Club has a restaurant, so I'm sure their potable water bill, plus they have showers and clean up for all the golfers.
No. Excuse me for interrupting, but I'm not quarreling with any of the bills. It just seems to me that the fire department's bill, especially when compared to the sewer departments, which I expect to be high, and the social country club, which I expect to be high because of irrigation and all, that the fire department's budget seems unusually high to me. And one suggestion was, well, they have so many hydrants, but if the water, if you fill up the pipes, you're not gonna use a ton of water when you flush. It seems to me when you test those hydrants and flush them once a year. Or
Andy, I hate to interrupt, but you're talking about two different things.
Yeah. So
The water on the fire hydrants is the emergency water service. The fire department's water budget is high because they all live there and they use water.
Yeah. So Andy, just so you know,
two different budgets.
South Shore Country Club does not use water for irrigation. They use zero of our water for irrigation. All the irrigation comes from the
I'm
pond.
sorry, can you repeat that, please?
The South Shore Country Club does not use our water for irrigation. They only use our water for portable use. So for the showers and the restaurant, all their irrigation is off the ponds and wells they have on site. So they don't use any. So
All right.
The fire department, like Sue just said, they all live there. They shower there. They feed, so
I'm sorry, Russell, can you move a little closer to your
Sure.
mic?
Yeah, when you move back, it sounds like you're underwater.
I'm sorry. So the water that they use at the South Shore Country Club is just for the restaurant and the golfers and the showers. Same with the fire department. They live there, but they do not use our water for irrigation at all. They don't. And they wash a lot of golf carts. They probably spend a good amount of money washing the golf carts. So for their budgets to be the same is not a surprise to me because of the size and the size of the mains they have in there and the usage.
So the water that's in the fire department budget, if I understand you and Sue correctly, is for potable water that that is used at the 3 fire stations.
Correct.
It has nothing to do with the water that comes through the hydrants.
No, that's paid for by the town.
Okay,
The water readiness fee, which I believe is called the water readiness fee, is paid for by the town. I don't know if it's from the general, but Sue would know that, but it's not from the fire department's own budget.
It's in the emergency water budget, Andy.
which is, where will I find that? Under what department?
It's the last one in public safety. It's with street lights and emergency fire hydrants.
Oh, public safety utilities, okay.
Maybe we should just respect Russell's time here and move on to the next question.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, Andy, you all set?
I think I am. Certainly didn't miss Evan the other night, but I take your point.
Okay,
Andy,
Feel free to call
I'm
me.
also
You can call me
intellectually
anytime.
curious, but we're walking off the reservation a little bit here. Let's.
okay. Next, could we, we'll hear from Kristen.
Hi, Russell. Sorry, I have another question again, and I don't know if this is, since we're going to be talking about the warrant later, I just want to clarify something on the budget sheet, which was on page 20 in our books.
Yep.
There is a line for proceeds from bond sales.
Yes.
Is that the amount that we're referencing for Article V?
I believe so. That would be Sue's question. Yes.
Yes. So
Yes.
can you just clarify? I know that Michelle went over this, and I don't know if this is a question more for Michelle, but is the $7 million the bond premium, or is it excess bond proceeds?
That would be Michelle. Sue's
Okay.
question, but
Okay.
I know it's from the sale, from the purchase of, from the, what we paid Aquarian. But because of the interest rates we got and things like that, by the time we went to close, there was this left over for paying Aquarian. And instead of giving the money back, everybody made a conscious effort that we probably would need that money to build the tanks and clean and fix the other tank. So they decided to leave the committee decided to leave it in there and use it as a bond.
Okay. I can follow up with Michelle just for the breakout then. Thank you.
Yep. No problem.
This is a multi-page budget. Do we want to, this is the, which page is this? Here we go.
Bob, did you still have a question? Or are you all set?
No, Kristen asked the question that I was going to ask, which I was only going to ask because Evan seemed desirous of having some questions.
I love that we have people that are in tune with it enough to ask that question. So Kristen, hats off to you for that one. That was a good one.
I've only been talking about it for 4 days straight now, so that's
Yeah, Russell, on the budget, where it is an enterprise fund, I just wanted to kind of shout out to you, and I looked at this back in December, and I know it's probably changed a bit since then, but where you've broken out, there were some line items that shifted a little bit, and when we walked through the explanation that it was, you were getting more specific about the types of capital improvements that you were making. I think when you showed up, they were all stuck in one bucket.
Well, no, those aren't capital improvements. These are just repairs. So
Sorry,
capital
just repairs,
improvements-
repairs and maintenance. Yep.
Yeah. So, we were breaking it down because Sue and I had a very long conversation about it. And we really wanted people to see, where the money was going in each part of the system. And that's why we broke it down.
Yep. I don't think that's this page though. Is it next?
Yeah, it's broken down. See, it's R&M vehicles, R&M grounds, R&M
Oh,
fire
yeah.
hydrants, water mains, treatment plants.
All right.
My
Other questions?
hand doesn't function. I don't have a question, Julie, but I just wanted to comment, and forgive me, Russell, I forget where this presentation was made. It was made probably 2 months ago. There was a presentation of all the improvements that the water
Yes.
company has made
Yep.
since the purchase.
I think that was to the League of Women Voters.
Yes.
Oh, was it to the
Right.
league?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, I would suggest if any of you haven't seen it to search it out. It's an impressive presentation of all the good that's been done for the 3 towns since the purchase.
I second that, Nancy. I didn't watch the League of Women's, but when he took myself and Dave did this back in December, I was thoroughly impressed with, and kind of made the purchase, something we deliberated on a few years back greatly. Something I thought was just a great opportunity for us. All right. Do we want to go down to the total expenses, and is this the bottom of it, Nance?
Yes. Yep.
Okay. Where am I? So what am I recommending on this one? I haven't done an enterprise fund one before.
You're recommending the total budget.
Okay, so I'll recommend a total budget for the Weir River Water Company of $12,881,442.
Does anyone else have any other questions for Russell or Evan? There's a dog.
That was
I
my
said
dog,
Your
sorry.
dog, that's that naughty dog.
The dogs are talking to each other.
They're looking for a fire hydrant.
Yeah. Wrong type of dog. Okay, well, it's exciting to see this budget as just sort of like a normal budget after, 2019, when it was just, so the purchase was there happening, and it was just, it's really exciting to see the refinement of this budget, and we'll see in the warrant articles, opportunities to keep reinvesting into the system. So thank you, Russell.
Yeah, thanks, Russell. And
Thank you.
thanks for making it on short notice.
Okay, so that is it for the Weir River Water System and budget. But Russell, if you can hang on for a couple minutes, we just have a quick update to the DPW budget, and then we will get going on the 2 water company warrant articles. But it's related. The DPW budget update is related in a way to the Weir River Water System, because I had mentioned, Sue, please correct me if I explain this incorrectly, but as I understand it, the DPW salary amount decreased by $10,000 because the Weir River Water System budget would reimburse the town for the DPW superintendent to assist or provide backup to the Weir River Water System superintendent as needed. Is that a correct characterization?
That's exactly right.
Exactly right.
Okay.
That's my rent for the office. It's my rent for the office. No, I'm just kidding.
Okay. All right. Well, it's good to have backup and well, it's nice to get $10,000 out of our regular operating budget. So why not?
It is because Randy is a wealth of information. Liz and the staff really helped me out. So the whole DPW has been nothing but amazing. Not taking away from Sue and everybody at Town Hall, but I live there, and they've been really good about helping me. Randy knows a lot about the water system. It's well worth the investment by Weir River to have them back up. So.
All right.
And Sue's okay too.
So yes,
So I don't know if a point of procedure is that we need to open up that budget page again and have our liaison just re-recommend the budget amount for the salaries for the DPW.
Is that in the same presentation?
No, I sent it separately with an email with our agenda.
I'm sorry, I
yesterday.
didn't, sorry, I didn't realize you were gonna wanted me to show it. Hold on, I gotta find it.
I sent you a text, sorry.
Do we have to do that if we're not voting it?
I don't know, I just was waiting for someone to say we don't need to do that. Or
I
we
mean, we're
need to do
chock
that.
full of lawyers here. And our resident parliamentarian, Bob, should know this.
Well, I don't think I have any precedence for a budget going down by 10,000, but I would think that whoever is keeping track of the budget scorecard, did Dave get that short straw again?
Yes, he always gets that.
What?
I
I actually thought this year someone new should learn how to do it.
Oh,
That was
yeah.
my thought.
All right, well,
George
George and I have to work that out.
I think we could simply reflect on the budget scorecard that the amount has gone down 10,000. And then when we come to vote it, we'll be all set.
All right. Sounds good to me. Okay, so that's it for the DPW budget update. And now we will proceed with warrant article hearings and potential votes tonight with Article V, which is the Weir River Water System appropriation of bond premium and excess bond proceeds. Kristen.
So there have been some questions that have come up in the last hour or so. So I don't know if we wanted to just go forward right now, or I'm nervous that my wording might be incorrect. I know that legal did look at it and signed off on the recommendation, but I'm not sure now if the $7 million is bond premium or it's excess bond proceeds. So I'm not sure if the numbers are explained correctly.
I think that kind of technically a bond premium is by definition excess bond proceeds, but I probably don't know that well enough to say that that's the way it should read in the
Yeah, I mean, this
legal
was
document.
how when I listened to the select board meeting, this is how Michelle worded it. So I worded it exactly the way she had.
Well,
But
then
Yeah.
just keep it, Kristen. Then
okay.
just keep it.
Yeah, okay. I think the other question that just came up was looking back to the original warrant from 2019. It said if there was any bond premium that it would be used, it says it may be used to reduce the original loan. So I think the question came up of why is it not doing that? But I don't know if it's because the wording there says may be used. It doesn't say it has to be used. That's just my opinion, but I don't know if we want to run that again by legal and me have to go back and ask them another question. So it's just technicality and wording. But I can go over the warrant and then we can
I mean, it's the intent of the warrant for that you've done, Kristen. It's we are a bunch of volunteers. I think then town council would need to kind of read through it again to make sure it's worded correctly for how you're going to apply, whatever money we're talking about, right? I mean, I had the same thing with the school windows one. So
yeah, and they did look at this already. I circulated it to them yesterday, so I would think.
lock and load.
But
So Michelle is going to join us later in our meeting tonight, Kristen. So if you feel more comfortable waiting for her to join, and then either she says, fine, let's just wait for just one more review from council or not. But do you want to do it like that?
sure, I'm fine. I thought we were good before we started. So, but now I'm just second guessing if it's correct or not. But I'm fine to go forward with it and just explain at least what this whole thing is, maybe.
Sure. Why don't you explain what it is? And
Okay.
then when Michelle joins us, we can just run it by her. And then if it's all good, then we can vote later tonight.
Okay.
How's that sound?
That's good. So the warrant is asking to appropriate a sum of money to be used for capital projects, specifically a new tank design, rehabilitation of the Turkey Hill water tank, and various other capital improvements. When we did the initial borrowing for the system in 2020, we received the funds then, and now the funds are being appropriated for capital projects. So there is no tax impact, no effect on the water rates. The money has already been borrowed. We're just appropriating the amounts to these capital projects. So if anyone has any questions on that.
Bob?
We're just reusing. Sorry, Bob. You go ahead.
Well, I think an observation and a question. I think the observation is that I think Kristen has it right, that the language that we put at the end of a bonding article indicates that the bond premium may be used to reduce the amount of the indebtedness. In this case, it's going to stay inside an enterprise fund in any event. It's not going to go back to the town general fund or whatever. It would conceivably, I suppose, if to the extent that it is used to reduce the debt, it might result in a lowering of water rates. But I think the decision as to how to use it is basically up to the water commissioners, i.e. The Board of Selectmen. And this seems to be how they have decided to use it. It seems like the proposed capital investment is spot on. And I suppose that's my observation. My question is for Russell, I suppose, and or Sue, or maybe Dave, that, it was my understanding when we bought the water company that we were going to up the capital investment in the system every year, I think starting to the tune of about 2.5 million. And my question is, I'm assuming that this $7 million in new or refurbished water tanks is in addition to that kind of built-in annual capital investment in the system.
That's correct, Bob. And Caitlin's article will speak to that right after this one.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Correct. It is correct, Bob. We're not using that money for this. This is being used for a specific purpose.
So it was never contemplated that the annual water main replacements, et cetera, of the 2.5 million or so was going to encompass a new water tank or a refurbished water tank.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
Bob, I think when we were going to market, we realized that rates were so good that there was going to be a premium received. And I think at the time the decision was made, recognizing that in the foreseeable future were some of these larger capital, not regular CapEx, but kind of extraordinary, for lack of a better word, with respect to Turkey Hill and the other water tank, that the decision was made to then take that premium at that time because the markets were so favorable and apply it to these things. And that's what we're really doing now, is just reallocating those proceeds and putting them in place to let Russell do these projects that we anticipated in advance of the purchase, but just knew they needed to be dealt with. I think I got that right.
Yeah, maybe it would be useful, Dave or Sue, for my further education and everybody else's enlightenment to the extent they need it, to explain what a bond premium is when we use that language in various articles.
Sue, you want me to try, or do you want to go for it?
Well, we can certainly do that. We can, right now, I'm not sure if that 7 million is premium, or I thought we borrowed more for that water tank replacement, and I thought it was proceeds. So we can get back to you, Bob, in the next meeting to figure that one out. But a premium is basically when we go to borrow, the ones that solicit our bonds will pay extra to get our bonds, because they will put it, in turn, put it on the market and resell it at a greater cost. So the extra money that a bank would pay for our bonds, that is called the bond premium. And usually on the bond premium, we pay for whether we have to have a rating call, we have to pay for the bank, and we have to pay for bond counsel going through everything. So the bond premium, we pay for all of those, and then the excess bond premium if we have any, that's where we used to put it in the stabilization fund many years ago. But with the Modernization Act, now we have to may use it to lower the bond cost or the borrowing cost.
That was kind of my general understanding, but you said it much better than I could. So as always, thank you. And
You're
it
welcome.
does seem like $7 million on a $114 million bond issue would be a pretty hefty premium. So maybe it does make sense in a later meeting to parse that out so that we get everything just right for the town.
Well, Sue was telling you that, I went back and looked at a few emails of mine, and I did explain it a little wrong. Sue explained it better than I did, because it was that once they saw what we were getting for a rate when they were borrowing the money and how much it was going to cost, they thought it was in the best interest of town to put the tank money in, because they knew they were going to have to spend it. So they put it in there with it and didn't change. It was already set in the plan for how much the long-term debt would be. So it worked out in favor for the town to get the money then. Right, Sue? Is that right, Sue?
I believe so.
Yeah, I went through my notes. That's what it said in my notes. So we can talk to Michelle too. We'll get it cleared up.
Okay, Nancy?
This is just kind of I just found it interesting. I can't remember where I read, I thought it was reading the article, that that it was specific before about where the new tank was, and now that specificity has been removed. And the only reason I noticed it is because I'd never heard of Strawberry Hill before. So I looked
It's
to see
a
where it
pretty
was.
spot in Hull. It's a really pretty
Yeah,
spot.
so I'm interested why that specificity got removed. Was there a reason?
Yeah, because that's where right now, so as we're doing the hydraulic analysis and looking at the system as a whole, that is right now the #1 recommended site in
Oh,
the,
it hasn't been
in the report.
determined?
Correct. So in the report we're going to get from EP at the end of the month, that is the #1 site recommended, but that doesn't mean we need to put it there or can put it there. That's the #1 site we recommend. So once we do some more work, which I'm getting a proposal on now, we can see if that site will handle the tank that we need. So
Okay.
again, that's basically why we took out the specificity, just in case that changes.
Thank you.
Hey, if this is helpful for folks, sorry to jump in, Andy. I know you got your hand up, but just speaking to Bob's comment, I was just looking back through my notes from I was kind of a fly on the wall in the financing conversations, and the way, just to Bob's point, that basically it was a lot more complex than it meets the eye, but there were different scenarios that the bond council or that UBS presented the town for financing this project. And one of the scenarios, which is the one that was adopted, was one that involved kind of a quote unquote overfunding, and it has to do with the interest rates. So the coupon was set at a certain rate for a certain amount of bonds. And because people were comfortable with a lower interest rate, they would pay more than the face amount of the bonds, and in turn, basically get a lower interest rate. And the analysis at the time and the discussion at the time said, with respect to the appeal, assuming the town was roughly indifferent from a debt service perspective overall between these scenarios, but this scenario that involved the premium or the excess proceeds, I agree, I can't tell you the answer to that. At the time, the discussion was, we know the tanks are needed in the near term, and this way, at no incremental cost to the town, we don't have to go back to town meeting for a bigger capital request. So we took that off the table. It was #2, it was beneficial to the rating agencies at the time, knowing that we were basically borrowing and setting aside funds for known major capital expenditures, so that they knew we were looking into the future and planning for that. And then as the final thing, the town's financial projections at the time of the acquisition could support this scenario without requiring a rate increase, which is the way it is borne out. So, you know, it's kind of lived up to what our hope was in summer of 2020 when this was sold in the market.
That's great. Thanks, Dave. Andy?
Yeah, I want I want to understand this article, and so I very much look forward to discussing it when Michelle is here. But one question I had is, are we required to see a budget before we appropriate $7,112,074 for capital projects? And I don't know what the answer is to that, obviously. Maybe Michelle does. The other thing is the original article, which appropriated 114 million to fund the purchase, said the money could be used for the acquisition for litigation expenses, repayment of the litigation expenses and other costs incurred, and to fund first year capital costs for said water system. I guess the town acquired the property in July of 2020. So this would not be the first year capital cost. And then Article 10 also had at the bottom that the language about any premium received may be applied to the payment of costs approved in accordance with the Mass General Laws, approved by this vote in accordance with Mass General Laws, Chapter 44, thereby reducing the amount authorized to be borrowed to pay such costs by a like amount. So I guess I'm very much looking forward to having Michelle explain how it is that the town is appropriating this amount of money for these somewhat non-specific capital expenditures. So don't seem to be any answers, so I'll wait for Michelle. Unless George has an answer.
Yeah, Andy, when you said are we required to see a budget, do you mean like a line item detail for the expense of a water tank project?
I don't know how detailed it has to be, Bob, but something like that, some sense of why we're appropriating $7 million. And
Well,
we have no idea what it's going to cost.
Yeah, I mean, I would think that that's the kind of background information we would typically ask for, and that Russell may be able to provide.
So,
Yeah, why don't we let Russell jump in, please?
Go ahead.
so, well, without being, I mean, when you say without being specific, we gotta do a tank. It's just not, we can't, I don't want to be specific on exactly where we're gonna put it. So we are building a tank. It just depends on what site is the best for the tank that we want to build. The second thing is Turkey Hill rehab is specific in the warrant because that's the tank we have now that needs to be rehabilitated because the other tank was rehabilitated before we took over the system. The third thing in that warrant is for other capital improvements that need to be made for the tank. So as we go into the design of the tank, we may have to replace a water main heading up towards the tank. We may have to replace a water main on near Tasket Ave to help feed the tank. We will have to upgrade the booster station down in Hull. That's a potential thing. And I do have a draft budget for the tank and all that. So right now, the storage tank right now is budgeted for $4.2 million. The booster station upgrades are budgeted for $950,000, and the Turkey Hill storage tank rehabilitation is $2.1 million. So that comes out to about 7.25. Those are budget numbers that I did myself. I did all the research, got what we could. I do have our environment department putting together an entire budget for us to look at. But those are the budget numbers that we have for the warrant article.
That satisfies my question, answers my question, that satisfies me on that aspect of it. Thank you, Russ.
Oh, no problem.
Thanks, Russ. Does anyone else have any questions at this time? Otherwise, we could just wait until Michelle is able to join our meeting. All right. Thanks, Kristen. I know it's, sorry, it's not quite so straightforward, but we will figure this out. All right, so moving on to Article W. And we have Caitlin with the capital projects.
Yes, thank you, Julie. So Article W is seeking funding for capital investments in the Weir River water system for FY22 and FY23 in the amount of 2.7 million for each year. This is all part of the town approving the purchase of the water company, which was voted under Article 10 in the 2019 annual town meeting. The town's financial model for the purchase included the 2.7 million annual capital investment amount, which were for water mains and other major capital items within the system. Within that financial model, there was a projected increase of about 5% every 3 years. So starting in FY 2024, future investment amounts, we should see it should see some increase. It was projected about 5% in that financial model, but obviously that's subject to an adjustment when the time period comes. And then, we intend to borrow the money to fund this investment amount, and it will have no impact on taxpayers or the town budget, as it's part of the enterprise fund. Sorry, my son is sitting here on the floor.
Oh, okay.
Of course, they just know when you go off mute. It's like second nature. Yeah, so that's the gist of the article. Any questions?
So I see that you changed the recommended motion in the most recent.
Yes, so after
version
talking
of the article.
Yeah, so I caught up with Michelle, and instead of being very specific as to the 2.7 being spent in FY 2022 and FY 2023 respectively, it was, in discussion with her, it made more sense to just do the 2 in total. Again, she's coming on so we can get some more clarity there. She's definitely going to speak to it better than I am. But the FY 2022 amount, from my discussion with her, should have been included in last year's, and so we're including it in this one's to ensure that we had the capital spend for FY 2022.
All right. Bob?
Yeah, I went back and looked at the Article 6 Weir River Water System budget for last year at the last annual town meeting. And I'm not going to remember the exact number of $13 million. And I don't think it was broken out between capital and other expenditures. And so my question really is, I believe for at least FY22 that 2.7 million was already appropriated at the last town meeting, but it just wasn't broken out as a capital designation. Is that right?
That wasn't my impression, Bob, but I could have totally missed that, to be honest. I don't know if anybody was here last year.
Well, I guess, I mean, my question is really, is this already appropriated money that's just being redesignated? Or is it new money that has to come out of the Weir River water system? And therefore, I think the comments said there won't be any effect on taxes or water rates. But if there's a 2.7 million rise in expenses, I would think it would almost have to be almost imply that there'd have to be a water rate increase.
I just saw Russ come off mute. Russ, did you want to answer that?
Yeah, so Bob, no, it's in the short term and in the short term debt that we already had budgeted. It was just an oversight by us. It was included in all my budgets last year. It was included in all the capital we did last year in the budget process. I think it was just during the warrant article for the town, it wasn't included in that part of it. So it's already laid out for the 10-year budget that we started with, that the A&E committee and the committee to buy the water system put together. So it's all in there. It's just a matter of, it wasn't, allocated to go there, but it will not affect anything.
So the debt service
Yes, correct.
on the 2.7 million a year
Yep,
for FY '22 and going forward was reflected in the previous appropriation, but it
It was-
just wasn't called out as a capital
That's-
designation. So there's
yeah.
no, there is really no change in the budget number for FY '22. And there would therefore be no change in the water rates.
correct.
Okay, all right. Thank you.
And just so everybody knows, since I have your attention, we are not, there's no rate increase this year either. We've already discussed it with the board, discussed it with the selectmen, and we're not gonna have a rate increase this year again. So that's good news.
All right, thank you. Andy?
Yeah, maybe I misunderstood you, Bob, but the comment says that the debt service will have no impact on taxpayers, but will be repaid by water ratepayers. But I don't think it says anything about the water rates increasing or decreasing.
I don't know whether it was in the prior article comment or this article's comment that there was a statement about no impact on water rates. I don't have them right in front of me at this point, but from what Russ just said, I would understand that there's not going to be any impact on water rates.
No.
And
All right,
so
well,
if it's
that's-
not in the comment, maybe it should be.
Well, I don't, it's not in the comment, and I don't know if we know enough to say that, but the recommended motion is authorizing borrowing in the amount of $5.4 million. And if you're saying there's already 2.7, half of that was appropriated last year, why are we incurring this additional debt?
I don't think we're incurring additional debt. What we're doing is we're probably taking a vote on incurring debt. The debt service was for which was already included in last year's Weir River Water System budget. Did I say that right, Russ and Sue?
Yes, we already accounted for the debt service in the budget, in the enterprise fund budget. What we didn't do was appropriately get it out there to be approved for borrowing, correct, Sue? Is that correct, Sue?
I
Yes,
believe that's correct, yes.
yes.
So did you get 2.7 million last year?
Well, we didn't borrow all the 2.7. We did have a $5.4 million budget for FY '21 and '22. I think we only want to line up, I don't know what, Sue, what did we borrow? We didn't borrow that much, but we're gonna use that money this year, so we're gonna want to borrow on it. So over the first 2 years, we're absolutely probably gonna have 5.4. Because we're finishing up a large project on Atlantic Ave. And then the other 2.7 is for FY '23.
So that then the town is going to be borrowing the 5.4 and for payment to the water company.
Yeah, the difference between whatever we borrowed in FY '21, we're gonna borrow the rest in '22. And like I said, the debt service is already within the enterprise fund budget.
Yeah, this suggests that there wasn't any borrowed in '22, but
No, there wasn't any borrow in '22. There was borrow in '21. We want to borrow for '22, but again, when I did the budget last year, the debt service was included in the FY '22 budget. What we failed to do was spell it out and get it voted on. So that's what we're trying to do now.
It just wasn't a special article, Andy, last year to borrow the 2.7. So we're just correcting that.
So it was not borrowed last year.
Exactly.
It will be borrowed this year.
Yes.
Okay.
So
And
next
that-
year we should,
And that has nothing to do with the capital improvements regarding the new refurbished or new water tanks, right?
No. No.
Different articles, yes.
Thank you.
so do we expect that next year and each year there'll be an annual article to make this appropriation for capital projects?
Yeah.
Yes, it'll probably be a perennial.
Yes.
Um,
Like
Yeah,
Hannah Lincoln?
that's exciting.
Kristen, just for your information, I have been texting Michelle and Tom about your question. She actually talked to Gene Montgomery. The 7 million is bond premium, and Gene confirmed it.
Oh,
So your article is correct the way it is written.
Well done, Kristen.
gee, does that get us to a quadruple A bond rating?
It's a 5-star bond rating.
Come on, Bob, I'm under enough pressure to make sure I don't blow up the three-star. So we're under a lot of pressure in the water company to keep the 3-star bond rating. So let's get back those 3 years.
Okay, so just for a moment, sticking with Article W with Caitlin's article, has everyone had a chance to ask questions, make any comments? I think we have the information that we need probably to take a vote. Everyone, you ready to vote?
Ready?
So
Yes.
Caitlin, can you make a recommended motion?
Yeah, and then Julie, remind me, I just read the recommendation, right?
You can read it or you can paraphrase it if you want, or read, the first couple sentences.
Okay. And I start with I recommend.
Yep.
Thank you. So I recommend that the town appropriate an amount not in excess of $5,400,000 to pay costs of designing, engineering, constructing, reconstructing, repairing, and improving the Weir River water system.
And then
Second.
the associated legal language.
Okay, to meet said appropriation, the treasurer.
Oh, no, I'm just,
Oh, sorry.
sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt like that, but I was just saying yes, and all the associated legal language.
Gotcha. Okay, I thought you meant to read it. Yeah, that's
No.
simple.
All right, so we got a second from Andy. And does anyone have any other comment or question? Okay, then we'll do a roll call vote. Bob,
Aye.
George,
Aye.
Nancy,
Aye.
Dave,
Aye.
Evan,
Aye.
Andy,
Aye.
Daveline,
Aye.
Brenda,
Aye.
Kristen,
Aye.
Al.
Aye.
Matt,
Aye.
Caitlin,
Aye.
Sarah.
Aye.
Okay, so I've got 13.
13-0.
Thank you, Caitlin. And now would we feel comfortable enough now to go back over to Article M? Do we
Yeah.
have the information that we need from Michelle?
Article B.
What did I say? Oh, sorry, Article V.
I'm not sure that I understand completely. The question I have is there authorization to use the 7 million, to appropriate the 7 million for the capital expenditures as opposed to reduction of the debt? That's in essence, I guess, my question, and I guess
If we put them, yeah, Andy, just, I hear you. I understand your question now, and I was listening to Sue and to Russ. If we put it back in the enterprise fund, it's then at the discretion of the water commissioners and the superintendent, right, to use the funds as they see fit, which is the purpose of having it there in the first place.
No, I understand that, and which sort of raises the question, why are we appropriating?
Okay, Andy, Dave's waving his hand. He might have your answer for you.
So let me try this again. Now that we know this is bond premium. So when we went to market, we were overpaid. We took in more proceeds than we were seeking to get the interest rate where the investors wanted it. The language you're referring to, Andy, in terms of paying down the debt, I think you're misunderstanding it. We wouldn't use the bond premium to pay down the debt because we just agreed to take in more debt with the premium at the time of the transaction. What I think that language refers to is paying costs associated with the borrowing. And then whatever premium is received, I think the intent of the restriction is to keep the premium received within the project in which the money was raised. So you can't use this to fill our budget gap, or you can't use this to buy a pool. And so I think that I don't think there's really any choice. It's a circular argument to say we borrowed an extra 7 million and now we're going to use that 7 million to pay back the 7 million extra we borrowed. So I think you're getting caught up in the repayment thought there. And I don't think there's really any, I mean, I will certainly tell you, I mean, if you're talking about a legal authorization to do this, I'm assuming if it's gotten to us this far, that either doesn't have to exist or does exist already. Because I will, like I said, I listened to all the calls in June of 2020 related to this premium, and it was certainly affirmatively decided to take the premium as opposed to just lowering the amount we would borrow overall in furtherance of making Russ happy down the road with respect to these capital projects that we knew were coming. So I guess I'm unclear where your hang up is, because I think this is consistent with the intent at the time, and it seems to hold logical sense to me.
The Article 10 specifically authorized the spending on the bond proceeds for capital improvements during the first year of operation, and I thought maybe we could get over that hurdle by the last paragraph, which refers to repayment, but it referred to repayment. I thought of repayment, but I think you're right, as I reread it for the 12th time, that the premium can be used to pay costs associated with the borrowing. And but typically, of course, the premium would go into the general fund, right? But on an enterprise fund,
no, I think the whatever that's called, the Modernization Act changed where the premium can go.
Well,
Sue, am I right about that? Yeah, I don't think it wouldn't make sense that you could raise a bond premium for a specific project like this in the enterprise fund and then spend that money to close a budget gap, to me. So that's what I think that's the restriction is if you're going to raise bond premium on a debt exclusion, it's got to stay within the project for which the debt was excluded, I believe.
We have in the past used, and I don't know when the modernization came in, but in
I think it was 16 or 17.
Okay.
Because I think I actually wrote the comment around that, if you can believe it.
All right. So the all right. I'm getting so much into the weeds that I'll take this offline with you, Dave and Sue. But the last question I have for maybe for Sue is, why do we bother with a motion to appropriate the premium after the original appropriation of the proceeds of the borrowing?
That I think is going to be a Michelle question.
All right. Okay.
Well, unless Bob has the answer.
Well, let me offer this. I think number one, that because this was a bond premium received within an enterprise fund, it needs to stay within the enterprise fund. And if we think back to our budget approvals, I think, for example, with other enterprise funds, I do think we make specific approvals for capital. Correct me if I'm wrong, but that was not done for the Weir River water system last year. There was no breakout for capital. Otherwise, I'm not sure why we're doing this. I think basically because it's a capital expenditure, I think our approval may be necessary. For example, so do we, with the HMLP, when they make capital improvements every year, do we generally approve an overall capital number and
The lake plant? We don't talk
we
about.
don't even do it. We don't
at
even
all.
do anything with them.
No. Well, they're a separate entity.
They're not an enterprise fund, but for the country club, if we for their annual budgets, do we break out their capital investments and improve that?
We never did before. We are starting to break them out now because of Weir River.
Okay, so this is
It
kind of a
used to be
change in,
one lump sum for the country club and that go to capital, but anything for capital was paid out of the enterprise fund.
so
which
is
will
this
be the
kind of a,
same.
sorry, is this kind of a change in town policy as to?
Well, I think the only
approvals?
reason why is because it's a borrowing.
Yeah, whenever we borrow funds, we have to have the approval of the town
Exactly.
because we're ultimately pledging the full faith and credit of the town to pay back the debt if the enterprise fund doesn't do that.
Exactly.
So that's why we're approving this.
Exactly, because it's a borrowing.
Okay.
Bob just landed the plane.
All right, how's everybody doing? We ready to vote?
Yep.
Okay, Kristen, do you want to make a recommended motion?
I recommend that the town appropriate $7 million bond premium and 112,074 excess bond proceeds from the 2020 borrowing to finance the acquisition of Weir River water system to be used for 1, design and construction of a new water tank, 2, rehabilitation of the Turkey Hill water tank, and 3, various other capital improvements throughout the Weir River water systems.
Second.
Any more discussion? Okay, we come to vote by roll call. Bob,
Aye.
George,
Aye.
Nancy,
Aye.
Dave?
Aye.
Evan,
Aye.
Andy,
Aye.
Daveline,
Aye.
Brenda,
Aye.
Kristen,
Aye.
Al,
Aye.
Matt,
Aye.
Caitlin,
Aye.
Sarah.
Aye.
All right, we've got 13-0. Thanks, Kristen. Thanks, Russell. Really appreciate your coming out to join us tonight for these.
No problem. Thank you,
articles of
everybody.
budget.
Thanks again, Russell.
Have a good night, guys.
Thanks, you too. Okay, so now we come to 3 articles dealing with the schools. So first up is Article X, the high school tennis court rehabilitation, which is George's article.
Thank you, Julie. I do want to mention that that on the call with us tonight, we have Mark Thurell from the rec department and John Ferris from the school department. So this article, and I'll read the article, is: will the town vote to raise and appropriate, borrow, or transfer from available funds a sum of money not to exceed $864,000 to be expended under the direction of the school committee and/or recreation commission for the purpose of funding a project that would construct 6 new post-tension concrete tennis courts at Hingham High School or act on anything related thereto. So the article has been inserted at the request of the school department and it is inserted by the school department because the school department or the school committee has jurisdiction over the property at the high school. The project itself is being done as a joint effort between the school department and the rec department. And Mark can certainly speak for himself, but he has fully endorsed the project. I've spoken to him a couple of times about the project. He's been deeply involved in it. And as with all the fields in town, the rec department is now very deeply involved. So the background on this article is that there are 6 tennis courts at the high school. They're used by the tennis team and also by the public. The courts are old. I don't think anybody knows the exact date they were put in. They certainly have been rehabilitated over time, but the condition of the courts right now is really pretty bad. All of the courts have cracks in them and uneven sections, making play somewhat dangerous. Someone could catch a toe and take a fall. And certainly if a ball hits one of the cracks, it's going to, play is going to be adversely infected. In fact, this past spring, one of the courts was declared unable to be played upon for team activities. So the courts do need to be replaced. Mark has gone out and secured a couple of bids and talked to some folks at Weston and Sampson, the people who did the field study for us. There are 2 ways to repair or replace the courts. One is to replace them with asphalt, which is what they are right now. Asphalt is less expensive to install. The cost to install asphalt courts is about $490,000. But they don't deal with weather very well, and they need repair on a more frequent basis. And Mark put together an estimate, which was in the package that I sent out to you, of the 25-year cost for either building asphalt courts or the concrete, the steel and concrete ones. You can see here, doing the courts with asphalt is cheaper initially. Ongoing maintenance is more expensive, and ultimately over a 25-year lifespan, the courts made with asphalt are considerably more expensive. Now, the steel and concrete is more expensive to put in, but it is much more durable. It is much less susceptible to the effects of weather. And over a 25-year life cycle, it is considerably cheaper than using the asphalt. So the recommendation would be to replace the courts with the concrete and steel option. And with that, I will take questions, or Mark and John can take questions.
Anyone have any questions for George or Mark or John? Bob?
Yeah, my question relates to the funding source. I think the last draft of the recommended motion I saw contemplated borrowing.
Yeah, can I just speak to that, Bob?
Yeah, sure.
So I did insert language. And Nancy, could you bring up the article itself?
Sorry, it's 3 different documents, so I have to.
Yeah.
Nobody told you this when you signed up for secretary, Nancy.
And this is a new wrinkle in the secretary job.
It really is. Zoom wizard.
Come on, she's a technology jet pilot.
I know, I was gonna say better her than me. Or you, Bob,
We know.
sorry to
All
say.
right, so while Nancy's bringing up the article, which has the language
That's
Bob
it,
is
Julie. Kick
referring
me
to
while I'm going out the door.
So I was uncertain as to how this project would get funded, and so Nancy, if you scroll down to the bottom, okay. So there is language in here that begins in the first bolded paragraph, third line from the bottom, to meet said appropriation, and continues through the next paragraph. That language is necessary if we're going to be borrowing to fund this project. At the time that I put together this article, and Bob had suggested that I add that language, being uncertain as to how the project would be funded, I added this language. If the project is not funded by borrowing, then none of this language would apply. It would all come out. And the other thing that would come out is that if we're not borrowing, then it's a simple majority vote at town meeting and not a 2/3 vote.
And so we have to take the word out borrow as well in the first line of the
Right,
recommendation.
right.
And essentially, it's my understanding that we'll hear later tonight from the town administrator that he is recommending the use of unrestricted fund balance for this article, which I personally would support.
Yeah. You're letting the cat out of the bag, Bob, but that's sort of late breaking news, so that's correct.
It's already on the Excel spreadsheet that Julie distributed.
All right.
Bob did his homework.
Al, do you have a question? Not sure who's
Sorry if
hand is up,
yeah.
but
Yes, but thanks. Sorry if I missed this, but when were these courts constructed?
yeah. You mean the latest version of them?
I guess another way to ask the question is 25-year time frame a realistic way to look at the expected life of the courts?
Yeah, I think they were last major renovation was around 2008. There was expenditure in there. I don't have the exact details on that.
And yeah, I didn't mean to put you on the spot on the exact date of it. It's 25 years a realistic lifespan for either version.
Yeah, I think some of that may very well be coming from Sampson and Weston. And I would say that it seems to me that something that I've seen from Sampson and Weston does say, 25 years is expected on the concrete and steel. And the asphalt is, if we did a major renovation in 2008, now we're what, 14 years out, and we're talking about a complete rebuild of them. So I see John has his hand up. Maybe he has some additional information that.
Yeah, George, I'd just like to offer, so I mean, in 2008, if we did renovations in 2008.
Hey, John, can you speak up a little bit louder or come closer? Sorry, we're having trouble hearing you.
No,
Thanks.
I'm sorry, maybe, are you coming, am I coming through now or no?
Just a little quiet.
No, I don't know, I'm actually on a different computer here, so. Can you hear me now?
That's a little better.
Any better? No?
I think that works, John.
Okay, I just wanted to suggest that in 2012, we had to refinish those courts, and that was a cost of about $45, I think $49,000 or $50,000. So if we did renovations in 2008 as well, that could have been a refinish and then. So, I mean, we've been nursing the courts along, and even after we did that refinishing, which basically is there were big cracks, and it's a sort of a resurfacing process where they clean it up, they fill the cracks with some matter, and then they cover it with a sort of a cloth type fabric, and then they paint the whole courts over again. And you knew that over time that some of those cracks would reopen, new cracks would develop. So every year you had to put a little bit of maintenance into them. So that was 2012 that we did that. It was a little project that was associated with the track. And you know, over the years, we probably spent another $10,000 one year, $3,000 another year, just to sort of continue to keep them patched up. In 2012, we did contemplate a total reconstruction of them, but since we were undertaking the track and we had that field project underway, you know, in progress or being discussed, the lower cost solution was accepted. As far as so those have been going for a while, Alan, and I think that if they are maintained, it doesn't mean that they're just going to be less crack resistant for the most part. They may have to be refinished or repainted at some time like another, but the crack should not appear as quickly. And I think, you know, I think we will get a 25-year life out of them.
Thanks, Jen. Al, are you all set, or do you have more questionings?
Oh, good. Thank you.
All right, Caitlin?
Thanks, George. I had a similar question to Al in terms of how realistic the 25-year life was. So I think I'm okay there. I guess the other kind of question or thing I'm thinking through is like, so this goes on, can you just confirm for me, this goes through as a separate warrant article because it's on school property? Is that, because I'm thinking, you know, like the basketball courts, we didn't make it in this year, which seemed like they had a similar kind of issue with cracks and stuff, but so is the difference is that these are on school property, so you can put that through a warrant article versus other things that were deprioritized on the capital?
Well, the basketball courts were a CPC request.
Okay.
And you know, could rec have gone the warrant article route for the basketball courts? They probably could have, but they chose to go to CPC direct instead. So
okay,
it's really from the school department's perspective, Caitlin, it's the size of the project. We don't have $800,000 from our capital budget. I mean, you know, we already spent 500 and you know, about 400,000 for technology. And then we were trying to repair buildings with whatever's left over from, you know, anywhere between $1 million or a 1.3 allocation. And there's only 2.7 allocated for capital overall. So when we get into these large items, it's really an article needs to be the method of choice for funding.
Yeah, no, that's helpful. I think just George even clarifying that the warrant route, it was an option for the CP. That makes sense to me. So thank you for explaining the mechanics. I'm good.
all right, thanks, Caitlin. Matt?
This seems like a really good project. I was thinking about on Tuesday night, we were joined by a number of residents who were concerned by the ability of another place of recreation to turn a profit. Does that ever come up with residents with a project like this that's not specifically for school use, but is for the public recreation and the ability to turn a profit on such project? Does that come up with residents ever? For Mark and John? I don't see any of those residents here tonight, but I just wanted to see if that was something that comes up ever.
I think Mark should talk to the profit, because with the, you know, and another thing for doing this project jointly is, you know, to make sure that the turf management group is exposed, because they're doing a bang up job. And that's the way the town needs to proceed in the future, by having that turf group and allowing them to get funding so that they can manage these projects. But I think Mark, you know, his group, the recreation, is receiving all the revenues from there. So certainly we want to make sure that the residents know, you know, I mean, I love the idea of fund balance. I love the idea of a promotion that basically would say, hey, here's your fund balance at work, so everybody knows we're starting to spend it, or they're starting to see you're getting some real results. Because I mean, tennis, the tennis team uses it for the high school, but it's not just about athletic sports. It is an asset that's for use by the residents. And to the extent Mark would rent them, he does have a fee structure, I know. And Mark, I'll let you talk about that side, because you know, your rates were always different than mine, and I'm just there to manage it.
I just want to clarify my question. It wasn't about whether or not it's profitable. The question was, do you ever get concern from town residents about it? Because there seemed to be a lot of concern earlier in the week about another project. My sense is there is no concern about the profitability of this project, but I wanted to confirm that with you all. Don't really care if it is profitable or not. I think it's a great idea, but I assume you never get pushback from residents about the profitability of a project like this. Is that fair?
Yeah, I think that's correct, Matt. I think tennis courts and street hockey courts and basketball courts and playgrounds are kind of just looked at as open and accessible for the general public to come and play. So I think those items are sometimes less scrutinized than indoor facilities or our fitness room that we run here. Everything's kind of supposed to break even, but I think on the outdoor recreational amenities, those aren't looked through the same light.
Yep. Okay, thank you.
Thanks,
Stole my
Matt.
joke, Matt. I was going to wrap up by saying we should build a bubble around the courts.
Alan, that was
I would
asked
vote for it.
That was
You
asked
stole
for
my-
and that was suggested. That was
You
asked
stole my
for,
thunder.
chime in, suggested.
Sarah, do you have a question?
Yeah, I was actually just curious, Mark, if there are going to be pickleball lines on these courts as well, or if that's not really feasible at the high school because it's more for the high school team. But in terms of league use, I was wondering if it would be open to pickleballers too.
Yeah, there's definitely a large pickleball population in
I
Hingham.
know.
And they
In my
definitely
backyard.
want their own dedicated pickleball space. They also would like to see pickleball lines on any tennis courts. I think John and I's thought on these particular courts, because they're at the high school and used for the high school tennis team, that perhaps we would have one set of tennis courts that did not have pickleball lines, because believe it or not, when we put pickleball lines at Cronin or Plymouth River, we'll get the tennis players calling us saying, why did you put the pickleball lines on the tennis court? So we're thinking that perhaps this would be the one location where, being at the high school, where it may not have pickleball lines. But if a pickleball player were to ask us, we would tell them that we certainly support dedicated pickleball space sometime in the future. It's supported in the field and court study. This just happens to be one of the more high priority items for this current year, kind of taking care of what we have, and then somewhere down the line, perhaps we could look at dedicated pickleball space.
Fair enough. It makes perfect sense to me, given the location. I was just curious. Thanks, Mark.
Thanks,
Sure,
Sarah.
thank you.
Andy, do you have a question? Andy, you're on mute.
Yeah, I was just going to add to the response to Matt's question. The high school needs tennis courts in order, if they're going to field tennis teams, obviously. So the residents don't view that the same way they view other amenities not directly related to the school, I suspect. So that when Mark comes back and wants to build his pickleball court, I think you may see some residents asking the question about profitability and priorities that you will not get with a high school tennis court.
Thanks, Andy. Nancy, you have a question?
I just want to put in a note of clarification for Andy that there is a high school swim team.
There's what?
There is a high school swim team.
Oh boy.
Yeah, I think that was
I'm gonna
part
get
of that was part
popcorn.
of the argument the other
All
night.
right,
right?
we're kind of getting away from
Yeah.
the article itself, guys, at this point. So if there are no more questions on this article, I'll make a motion. Andy, your hand is up, but I'm assuming you just haven't lowered it. So I'd like to make a motion that the town raise and appropriate or transfer from available funds a sum of money not to exceed $864,000 to be expended under the direction of the school committee and/or recreation commission for the purpose of funding a project that would construct 6 new post-tension concrete tennis courts at Hingham High School.
Second.
Second that motion.
Any discussion? All right, we'll take a roll call vote. Bob,
Aye.
George,
Aye.
Nancy,
Aye.
Dave?
Aye.
Evan,
Aye.
Daveline? Oh, sorry, Andy?
Oh.
Yeah.
Aye.
Andy. Brenda,
Aye.
Kristen,
Aye.
Al,
Aye.
Matt,
Aye.
Caitlin,
Aye.
Sarah.
Aye.
Okay, that's 13. All right, thanks, George.
All right, thank you.
So next up, we have Article Y, which is Evan. And he's going to explain why we have to have this article this year.
Yes.
Sorry.
Nancy, did you get the one that I sent like 10 minutes
Yes, I'm
ago?
trying to pull it up. Hold on. Hold on.
Okay, thank you. And thanks to Andy and Bob for their eagle eyes.
I guess
Oh.
legal eagles haven't.
Yeah, I'll shoot myself in the foot as this gets brought up here to say this shouldn't be too controversial. The history behind this article was, if we remember, there was an article and there was funding, there was a proposal amount we were waiting for at last year's town meeting for the Windows project, and we voted it on and updated, I think, kind of live at the meeting. Did we not? Bob, I think we did.
Yeah, the PRS Windows article last year was a fire drill from the get-go. We couldn't get numbers on it. In the original warrant, we said we'll make our recommendation at the town meeting. I think we met probably within 2 days of the town meeting to vote what was given to us at that point. And we were basically told this is what the MSBA requires for language. And we put it in a supplemental recommendation that came out very shortly before the town meeting. And so that was kind of the history last year. And last year, excluded debt was contemplated, which is why the article was in the form that it was in. And I don't want to steal your thunder, Evan, but.
Okay, all right. But thank you for the clarification, Bob. So this article really corrects language around a debt exclusion, which I think was caught late summer, July, August timeframe. And I think MSBA, along with John, you're on, caught it. And
Our
so
bond
the
counsel,
article
our bond counsel caught it.
Bond counsel caught it. So this is the recommend. What is this? The recommendation? Where's the, yeah, so the recommendation of this article is a repeat of the warrant question. And what I did, and Nancy, can you just scroll up? Sorry. Thank you.
All the way up?
All the way. Yep, all the way. Thank you. Yep. So Article Y, they're suggesting we now have the amount, the estimated amount of $3.993 and $600 to be executed. And what I did was just said that this article corrects the funding source from a debt exclusion as laid out in Article 23 at the 2021 warrant, and it was voted and approved on during the 2021 annual town meeting for the amount not to exceed, the number that I just said, for the replacement of windows at Plymouth River School. It was determined that debt exclusion was not the preferred funding source for this project. And then in the body of the article, I robbed and stole Dave's authorship of this article last year, changed the tense and the fact that the MSBA had approved our project. So we were no longer talking about potential approval of the project. And there's $1 million from the Broad Cove Alliance, or Broadstone or Broad Cove Alliance, that they'll go into this. And the MSB will reimburse us at 31.5% of total project expenditures.
Evan, that 31.5 is actually, it's actually 33.95 now. We know that, but that's correct. That's the minimum, the MSBA. So the language is correct. But we
Okay.
just know more about the project now than we did, back when we took the vote.
Okay. Sorry, did you say 33.95?
Yeah, 33.95, I believe, is
Okay.
the reimbursement rate for it. And it could go up, though. It could go up too when they do the final project budget, but.
Okay.
So
I'm
the
fine keeping it.
31.5 is
It
fine.
says, it says at least 31.5. If it goes
That's
up,
the better.
great.
Yep. I just wanted everybody to
and-
know that we know more about it now, but that's good. 31.5 is better for the warrant language, I think.
Yep. And I think because the debt exclusion would have required a special town meeting and a ballot vote potentially, so they wanted to correct it, and that's why we're putting this through now. And so the recommended motion looks just like a warrant question that was written and drafted by John Coughlin and provided to the Board of Selectmen. Any questions?
Bob, you have your hands raised?
Yeah, Evan, the only suggestion I'd make on the comment is that we spell out that the anticipated funding source is now non-excluded debt. And I don't know, it's my understanding that the amount of the borrowing is well within our non-excluded debt capacity. And whether you elect to mention that or not, I'll leave it.
Could you just scroll up? Yeah, no, that's a good call out, Bob. If you go to the first paragraph, I said it is determined that a debt exclusion was not the preferred funding source for this project. I did not get specific for what the funding source could be because my understanding was we wanted the flexibility to determine that, right? And Sue, I'm looking at your small face on a little tile on my Zoom screen.
That is for later on in the program.
Correct.
Yeah, I mean,
So
we're
Bob-
talking about it tonight.
Yep. So I guess we could add it's well within our debt capacity, but if people have been paying attention as we've been talking about our debt capacity, excluded debt capacity, I think they might know that. I'm happy to add it if everybody wants that.
Well, I don't know, maybe it makes sense to add that to the comment after we have our discussion later tonight. And just leave it to you as to whether to do that or
Okay.
not.
Okay. It won't
Evelyn?
change. It
Oh,
won't change. So go ahead, David.
Yeah, just in the recommended motion itself, at this end of the first paragraph, just to delete or act on anything related thereto.
Okay, just delete that. Okay.
Yeah, because we wouldn't be recommending that. That's from the motion itself.
Okay. So just.
If you don't, I'll do it as an editor, but then people will wonder why, what happened.
I actually have it up. I will do it right now. Thank you for that.
Brenda?
I just wanted to add my vote that since it says debt exclusion was not the preferred funding source, there should be some clear statement of what the funding source now will be. Because you keep reading through it, looking for that answer and it's not there. So I think that should be added once that's determined later tonight.
Okay.
All right, does anyone have any other comments or questions?
All right. Do you want to read the recommendation?
Yep, you want to give a recommendation, Evan?
Yep. Do you want to read the whole thing?
You can
Yeah,
read
I'll
the
do it.
first couple lines, and then
Yeah, I'll read that the town vote to raise and appropriate borrow or transfer from available funds a sum of money not to exceed $3.993,600,000 to be expended under the direction of the school committee and or the 2017 Hingham School Building Committee for window replacement project at Plymouth River School located at 200 High Street, Hingham, Mass. 02043, which replace necessary doors and windows to make other repairs or replacements as necessary to meet the MSBA requirements, which proposed repair project would materially extend the useful life of the school and preserve an asset that otherwise is capable of supporting the required educational program and for which the town has applied for a school construction grant from the Mass School Building Authority.
All right,
Yeah.
et cetera. Can I get a second?
Blah, 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 blah. Yeah.
Second the motion and the associated legal language.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Bob.
Any further discussion?
Julie, I
All
just
right.
have a
Yeah.
point of point of clarification, I guess, because I'm going back to my article a second ago that, Bob, if I understood you correctly, you suggested that you said I should take out the word borrow from the first line of the recommended motion. And yet we're leaving borrow in on this this article. Is there a difference?
The difference is fund balance is going to be used for for your article, George.
Right.
It's not going to be a borrowing. Well, there's still going to be a borrowing for this article. It's just going to be a non-excluded debt borrowing as opposed to an excluded debt borrowing.
Okay, that's great. Thank you. I just wanted to make sure I was going to leave borrow out of mine and so this, okay, thank you.
Couldn't you leave it in, Bob? Because doesn't the phrase transfer from available funds cover a transfer from the?
No, if the word borrow stays in, then you need to put all the other bond premium language in, and it translates to a 2/3 vote versus a majority vote.
All right, that's a good reason not to have borrow in.
All right.
Okay, everybody ready for a roll call vote?
Aye.
Okay, Bob,
Aye.
George,
Aye.
Nancy,
Aye.
Dave,
Aye.
Evan,
Aye.
Andy,
Aye.
Daveline,
Aye.
Brenda,
Aye.
Kristen,
Aye.
Al,
Aye.
Matt,
Aye.
Caitlin,
Aye.
Sarah.
Aye.
All right, great. And then the final warrant article is Article Z, which is the school bus lease. Daveline.
Yeah, so I sent this out last week. So it's a pretty straightforward warrant article. It is allowing or authorizing the town to allow the school department to enter into a municipal lease of up to 5 years for the purpose of leasing new 7D transportation vans, which are used for special ed transportation. You might remember last year we did a similar on leasing buses. So the purpose of this, Massachusetts state law does not allow municipalities to enter into leases of more than 3 years or contracts of more than 3 years without town meeting approval. So that's why we're doing this. The purpose of this would give the school department the ability to enter into the lease for these 7D vans that are used for special education transportation. These are used particularly to move students who are attending school out of the district. And also to use for pre-K special ed students. The vans are obviously more economical than buses because you have a small number of children there and they're much easier, sometimes only one child because of the child's disability. So in the end, this is a better saving. The school at the end, or the school department at the end of the 5 years actually owns the vans. That's different than the leasing of the buses that we did before, where you are able to purchase the buses at that time, but you just don't own them because of the 5-year lease. But here you do. And John Ferris, in our discussion of this, said he's actually looking in terms of vans that might be possible electric or hybrid vans, and whether we might in fact be able to get some kind of pilot program or grant program for that purpose. So I think that's the select board did vote unanimously in support of this the other night. And I think that's all I have. If people, John is here, if you have questions. And I will say, if people are looking, the cost of this is actually in the capital outlay budget. So that's it. So this is just authorizing the lease itself.
Thank you, Brenda. Thank you, Brenda. Thank you, Daveline.
It's all right. We're in the same
I
corner.
was looking at Brenda in like the upper left corner of my screen. Anyway, sorry. Bob has a question.
I don't have a question. I want to give a shout out to John Ferris for all the great work he's done for the town of Hingham and its education department over so many years. And one of the great things he's done has been able to identify the savings achieved from longer term leases such as this, which he has done over a number of years. So, John, you've just got a few months to go to get to the finish line. Thanks again for all you do.
Yes, I echo those thanks. Does anyone have any questions about this article or any comments? Okay, are we ready to vote? Daveline, do you want to make a recommendation?
Yes, I recommend that the town authorize the school department to enter into a municipal lease of up to 5 years for the purpose of leasing new 7D transportation vans used for special education transportation.
Second that a motion.
Any further discussion? Not, we come to vote by roll call. Bob,
Aye.
George,
Aye.
Nancy,
Aye.
Dave,
Aye.
Evan,
Aye.
Andy,
Aye.
Daveline,
Aye.
Brenda,
Aye.
Kristen,
Aye.
Al,
Aye.
Matt,
Aye.
Caitlin,
Aye.
Sarah.
Aye.
All right, great. Thanks, John. And thanks, Daveline, for this article. And we forgot to thank Mark Thorell earlier, but anyway.
We'll get another
Okay.
chance.
Yes, yes, we will.
Thanks, John.
Thanks, John.
Okay, so we have Tom Mayo and Michelle Monsevier who've joined us for our next agenda item, which is for the review of funding mechanisms for warrant articles. Today, I sent you a list of warrant articles that require funding this year, plus some future projects. Tom and Michelle are here to help us go through it. I appreciate having this list in hand and the opportunity to review and discuss it. First, I want to caution you that this list of projects contains articles which AdCom has not heard yet. This discussion is intended to view potential funding solutions, but it's not meant to be a discussion about any project such as what its merits are. We don't have most of this list on our agenda for tonight, so I want it to be clear that we're not going to discuss the details of these articles other than the list of the possible funding. And I also want to take a minute to review some terminology with you. On this spreadsheet under source, you're going to see borrowing, and you're also going to see debt exclusion. And I just want to review just in case, because it sometimes confuses me over the years or has. Borrowing is such that the debt service, which are the payments on principal and interest, will fall within the levy, within the operating budget. Earlier in our budget review process, we heard the budgets of debt service principal and debt service interest. So in our total operating budget, these payments are line items, and these budgets can only grow as they can within our tax levy. So hopefully I'm saying this correctly, but when debt retires, the operating budget gets more debt capacity to be able to add some borrowing for projects, but it's limited. And Sue, I think you've said that your estimate of total project costs, which could fit within the levy for borrowing expenses for FY23, is approximately $5 million.
Yes.
Okay. So the other potential to fund projects is to borrow funds outside the levy. That's called excluded debt. And that's a temporary tax increase, which is excluded from the limits of Proposition 2.5, that is used to pay the service costs on money borrowed to finance a specific project. Debt exclusions require a 2/3 majority affirmative vote at town meeting, as are all borrowing articles, but also require a subsequent majority ballot vote at our local election after town meeting. Does anyone have any questions about the differences between those two types of borrowing? Okay, So with that, I will turn it over to Tom and Michelle for, maybe Michelle, would you like to display the spreadsheet?
Sure. Oh, can someone make me a co-host, please?
Sorry.
Okay, thank you.
There it is, Sue. You finally get to be a someone.
Can everyone see this, or do you want me to make it bigger?
That's pretty big.
I can see it.
That's good.
All right, great. Thank you very much, Julie, for that intro. I tear away and throw away my second page of my notes.
Oh, sorry,
Nope,
I jumped the gun on it.
Perfect. Great minds think alike. So what you see before you tonight is Sue, Michelle, and I just wanted to present our funding recommendations for some near-term large capital projects. You're also seeing things that are not only haven't you heard for this year's town meeting yet, you're going to see have some conversation necessarily for out years as well. As the overall picture starts to crystallize, you start to the need to plan for all of it now, even a full year in advance, and in the case of the or a couple years in advance in the case of the senior center. It's important to have those conversations and to look at it as a whole. So, Julie said it well. Yeah, I think that there's a lot of decisions that need to go into these types of analyses that we do every year. They include, like she said, inside 2.5 borrowing, outside 2.5 borrowing, i.e. debt exclusions. Fund balance is often a resource we'll utilize, and I'll talk about that tonight. Also outside sources. MSBA, mitigation funds, and some of those other sources that we'll be able to use. And again, we'll talk about some of that tonight too. So without further ado, I'll just kind of walk us through each of these projects and what our recommendations are. So at this year's town meeting, we're going to be the town will be asked to fund 2 sets of pre-construction drawings or pre-construction documents, first for the Foster School and the second for the public safety facility. That's looking at approximately a total of about $4.7 million. That might be a little bit more. We're still working with the school building committee, the school building committee on that, and that $3 million number will be revised in the coming days and perhaps weeks. But the idea is that we believe we can borrow those pre-construction document funds. We can borrow those within 2.5, along with the approximate $1 million or so that would be left for the Plymouth River Schools windows projects after the $1 million of mitigation, the MSBA funds, and the about $1.1 million in borrowed but unspent funds that from prior school projects that we felt were appropriate to reallocate to this school project. So that would leave about $1 million, and that coupled with the 4.7 leaves us close to the debt capacity that Sue mentioned, depending on where these numbers fall out. But again, these are round numbers. The country club, we are looking at right now. We have a $7.897 million price tag on the country club, $550,000 of which would come from CPC. That still leaves an amount that we feel is beyond what we ought to be spending using fund balance, and are recommending that we use a debt exclusion borrowing for that project. The number is large enough that we don't feel we could fit it within the debt service within 2.5. So we are again recommending debt exclusion, which, by the way, any debt exclusions would also require a ballot vote. We're further recommending any projects over at the wharf walls this year. That is being determined and vetted through the Harbor Development Committee. Those projects would also be a debt exclusion, and we're anticipating that number sitting here today at about $4 million. The fire capital projects that are before us, these are a new fire engine that is due, I believe a roof on both the south station and the central fire, as well as HVAC improvements at central fire. All of those large capital projects are outside of the ability of capital outlay to pay, and really too small, in our opinion, for their own borrowing. So we were recommending that we use them for, it's kind of that middle ground, that we use unassigned fund balance for those. We're also, for the same reasons, we're recommending funding the high school tennis courts using the unassigned fund balance of about $864,000. And we will be talking to the school department about some potential use of the athletic fees. Liz Klein had asked John about that the other night, and I think that there was going to be some conversation about that. So I'm not sure where that will fall, but either way, I think we would use the balance from unassigned fund balance. The Country Club maintenance facility and the Weir River water system capital numbers are their borrowings, but they will be the debt service is paid for out of the enterprise fund. So scrolling down, this is jumping ahead a little bit to a planned fall town meeting here at the end of 2022. And this is where we would be asking the community to fully fund the Foster School, the public safety facility, the Foster School and the public safety facility. And you'll see here also that what we're recommending is an article that would reserve $7 million in fund from excess fund balance for the purposes of paying off to offset the debt impact of the two big debt exclusion projects, the Foster School and the public safety facility. And we'll show you some of that impact, what that might look like here in a minute. And then in the spring of 24, provided the public safety facility passed in the fall of 22, we would likely be ready to bring a request for renovations of the senior center forward to town meeting for debt exclusion of, it's a wild guess at this point, but upwards of $10 million, maybe less. We just don't know yet. It's too early to tell. So those are the projects. If you scroll over to the right, Michelle, you can see what we've done here is tried to summarize our use of unassigned fund balance for you. I think we've all heard the number of $12 million being thrown around. That is the existing unassigned excess fund balance above that of the financial policy. So above 20% of the total annual expenditures, the TAE. That leaves us, again, $12 million. What we're proposing in this plan is the use of approximately $10 million of it, earmarking those funds here in FY23. However, well, two of them in FY23 and the other two in the beginning of FY20, in the fall of 22. Get my fiscal year screwed up, but in the fall of 22, either way, we would earmark all of this money now, and we wouldn't actually be using the $7 million for Foster and the public safety facility until 2026, when we would be issuing the debt. But that brings us to a total balance, remaining balance of unassigned excess fund balance of just under $2 million going forward after this funding year, after this fiscal year. So given that, we've put together a couple of charts that I hope will help visualize the impacts of that $7 million over the coming years, and Michelle will walk you all through those slides. Oh, I'm sorry, Michelle, before you do that, I just wanted to state, and I should have said this up front, one of the tenets that we use when we were deciding how to fund things and how not to fund things, and really where unassigned excess fund balance should be applied. One of the tenets we used was, we believe that money should be used for mission critical and medium-sized capital projects. And that's how we came to the conclusions that we did. Both the Foster School, certainly, and the public safety facility are very much so mission critical to the purposes of the town government. So with that, I'm sorry, back to Michelle.
No, that's okay. I see Dave has a question. So.
Oh,
Sorry, can I ask a really quick question? Tom, when the, if we went with this strategy and the
Michelle,
pool
can you
and the
bring it
wharf
back up?
walls, the pool and the wharf walls go to a ballot vote. Does the ballot vote go individually by project like it would a town meeting, or in that case, would you get a combined debt exclusion of 11,897?
It's a great question, Dave. Not surprised you asked it. we'd have to look at it. I know we've combined them in the past. And I believe sometimes we do and sometimes we don't. I'm not sure if the history is that if they're related, we tend to combine them. I don't know that we have to. I don't know yet. I want to walk that through with the whole finance team, including frankly, John Coughlin and maybe even Rick Manley.
Okay, thanks.
You're welcome.
Okay, let me bring up the slides. Okay, so we put together a few slides to just try to help people visualize what we mean when we say we'd like to apply unassigned fund balance to offset the debt impact, the debt service and or the tax impact of the large capital projects. So these numbers, what you see here is the total excluded debt service to the town. These are projections that we used from the financial planning model. So all these green bars show you, in addition to the excluded debt service that the town is still paying in our debt service schedule, there's still 4 projects that we're paying off. On top of this, you see the 5 projects that Tom just went through that are debt exclusions. So Foster, the public safety facility, the pool, the wharf walls, and the senior center. Using our estimates of when we think that the long-term debt service would hit, what you see is in 24 and 25, a relatively small impact from the pool and the wharf walls, but then you see it starting in 26, the 2 large projects, Foster and the public safety facility, hitting all at once. So there's a very steep increase here in 26 that would directly impact people's tax bills. There's a little bit of debt retiring in 2029, so the bars start to go down then, but it's still fairly steep. So in our plan, we would use $7 million of fund balance, and I'll show you, we're just projecting at this point, say you use $4 million in FY26, $2 million in FY27, and $1 million in FY28 to make this slope a little bit more gradual. It would look like this in the blue bars. So what we're trying to do here is it's sort of easing the increase in people's tax bills and cutting off the top of the 3 green bars in 26, 27, and 28. Shown another way, if we use line graphs, you're looking at the difference between the green bar without the use of unassigned fund balance, and then the blue line, the blue line with the use of unassigned fund balance, and the area in between these two represents all of the money that taxpayers won't pay because we've used unassigned fund balance to pay that debt service. Does that make sense to people?
Really thoughtful.
And this is shown in your unassigned fund balance chart as the 4.7 million offset for Foster debt and the 2.3 million for public safety facility offset. Is that it?
Right. And so
Okay.
in that one, we basically just said, let's use 2/3 of the 7 million for Foster and 1/3 for the public safety facility. In this chart, I've just taken the whole 7 million and applied it in those 3 years as 4 million, 2 million, and 1 million. But that's, we have to figure out how we would structure that article for the fall if we do need to split it between the 2 projects, because what if it kind of sort of depends what passes. But that's the overall thought right now.
But and you would contemplate that being incorporated in the articles when they come up, but you would encumber the unassigned fund balance monies now?
Would
That's
reserve.
the idea. Yep.
I think we would do them in the fall, like at the fall special town meeting is when we would make that request, along with the request for the full construction money for both projects. if we do it now, it's sort of presupposing that town meeting would approve both. I think it would make sense. That would sort of be like the third article in the fall after the foster and the public safety asks.
Sarah, you have a question?
I do, yeah. And I may be misunderstanding the definition of targeted tax relief. So the way we're contemplating applying this, though, is uniform across the board. This would reduce the tax impact for everyone. That's
correct.
Regardless of no income. Are we even allowed to do it in an income-based way or no?
No.
No.
I didn't think so. So what, when it says we can use unassigned fund balance for targeted tax relief, what does that mean? Does that mean like this, but uniformly for everyone?
I think, Sarah, that means something like the circuit breaker tax for older citizens that meet the requirement of that kind of program. That's the targeted tax relief.
Okay. Okay, thanks. That's all I got.
Okay, Bob?
Yeah, I guess number one, I'd make an observation that the financial policy asks us to keep unassigned fund balance between 16 and 20%. And for whatever reason, we seem to default to the maximum, even though TAE is increasing every year, and therefore the range is increasing every year in terms of absolute dollars. And so I think there may actually be more unassigned fund balance available than what these charts indicate. The second observation I'll make is that in our last few meetings, I've listened very carefully to the observations of many AdCom members, one of whom even said that they were embarrassed that we have this amount of unassigned fund balance that we haven't put to work in the past. And the general feeling that I detected was that we'd like to see it put to work sooner rather than later with a capital S. So my question, which I kind of threw out to all of you last week about the pool project, was, should we consider using unassigned fund balance to fund that entire project, which is well within the numbers that have been presented tonight? I understand that the pool is not mission critical as Foster School and the public safety facility are. So that is, I think, an important consideration. At the same time, I do think there's a benefit to actually using the unassigned fund balance in FY23 to fund the pool project. And there's a concomitant advantage of not needing a 2/3 vote at town meeting and not having it on a ballot question. And assuming that a debt exclusion is approved for the pool, the effect on debt service in the future is, as I would see it, a wash or negligible, because we're going to have debt service on the pool starting in FY23 or FY24. And if it's paid for with fund balance, that debt service wouldn't be included in the later years when we are going to have debt service for the Foster School and the public safety facility. And I understand that I would support the idea if there is no support for using fund balance for doing the pool project, that we do reserve an amount, which basically will take that amount out of unassigned fund balance. And if we are going to reserve an amount, maybe we should be reserving an even greater amount than $7 million. And I'll be interested to hear Tom and Michelle's response or reaction to maybe what was more of an observation than a question, but is kind of a question. Thanks.
Sure, I'm happy to, Bob. A couple of things I realized now that I left off my presentation. One is the remaining $2 million that we've left in there, from that $12 million calculation, is the pressures on that $2 million are the usual fund balance reserve replenishments, reserve fund replenishments that we do on a regular basis. And those are like things like snow and ice, legal transfers, workers' comp, et cetera. So those are the pressures on that. I would also just remind the group what we heard from Richard Tortora when he was here. He told us at the time that, while we're in a strong position with the rating agencies, he would recommend in many places they maintain 30% of their TAE. And I believe he even said, and in rare instances, they maintain 50%. So I would not recommend you drop below 20% per what he was telling us. I understand that the window was 16 to 20%. You're absolutely right about that. That is the financial policy, but that is not the recommendation of our financial advisors. So my thought was leaving approximately $2 million in available unassigned fund balance was responsible, as it gives us the flexibility each year to fund the things that need to be funded. And we start applying this existing unassigned excess fund balance in ways that, I've been here since 2016. I've been hearing that we should be using excess fund balance to offset the tax impact of the new Foster School, and at the time it was the fire station, which has now become the joint public safety facility, but that we should be using that excess fund balance to offset those projects. I've been hearing that straight through. So you're absolutely right about, it would be nice, Bob, if we could find a way to utilize more fund balance to offset the impacts of those two projects. But I don't know that I would go much lower than what we're showing here. We did play a little bit with maybe a few more $100,000, but I think a $2 million limit is reasonable, because on any given year, you just don't know if you're going to have a greater need than that, and you really just don't want to be caught short. So again, these are my recommendations. You guys have to do your job and make your decisions, but these are my recommendations.
I understood, though, Tom, that it's the finance team who make the decisions about how to fund the warrant articles.
Yes, so we make these decisions. The Board of Selectmen will review them. One thing to remind everyone is anything that is that goes on a debt exclusion, or that is identified as a debt exclusion, also needs to be put on a ballot. And the only entity that can add something to the ballot is the Board of Selectmen. So so they would need to be in agreement with any of the debt exclusion projects. But yeah. Yep.
Okay, thanks. Caitlin, you have your hand raised.
Yes, thanks, Julie. I guess it's more of a comment. Tom and Michelle, if we're earmarking the money for Foster and the public safety building now, that's, as it says, 26 through 28, that's a long time away. What if something significant happens? We have another pandemic and we need that money for something else. If you earmark it so early, I'm assuming that means you can't touch it for other purposes if something something else comes up.
Yeah, it's funny, Caitlin. It's a great point. It's a little bit against what I think we normally do. We normally just, plan to use funds for a certain way, and then we don't do anything as drastic as legally restrict them. However, I was trying to be responsive to what I'm hearing from the community, which I think we just heard a little bit from Bob, in that, we have a large savings account. It is appropriate to use it. And I didn't want anyone feeling like, just because I say we're going to use it, we, take my word for it. I wanted to find a way to actually give the community the warm fuzzies that we actually, in fact, are going to use that money for that purpose. Town meeting can always undo anything, Caitlin. So town meeting can always change that. I just felt like it would be helpful for the community to, as they make the decisions to fund those two large debt exclusions, to know that there was in fact something that would help blunt the tax impact.
Totally understand that, Tom. I think the other thought that keeps coming to mind is, we still may have an issue on the expense side of things, right, for this year, in terms of, that's what I was trying to wrap my head around. And we're still a couple million off on the expense side, correct?
For the budget.
For the budget.
You're talking about the forecast. Yep. As of now.
And so if we're earmarking all that money for capital, but may still have something like an issue on the OpEx. I know it doesn't really it goes against like our policy, but that's something I'm trying to wrap my head around. I'm struggling not having like a full picture in terms of like
exactly
moving pieces.
I hear you, Caitlin. We are as well. I can tell you that, as I said at the selectmen's meeting the other night, I do see a path forward to a balanced budget this year without an override that is not using fund balance to balance the budget. We have enough funds from federal funds to help us get through this year, allow the school department time to do its work with its master planning effort, and come back next year with as John Ferris likes to categorize, a right sizing effort as a result of that plan, and then determine the size of and the appropriateness of an override next year. I do think that is a viable path that will be before us by the end of this budget cycle. There is still a lot of, it's just the timing, it's just time of year, right, Caitlin? There's still a number of decisions that entities other than myself, people like the Board of Assessors, the Board of Selectmen, they all have to make decisions, and I really am trying hard not to get too far out in front of them. But I can tell you that from my experience and knowing what I think I know about how Hingham works, I do see a pretty clear picture towards a balanced budget without having to use fund balance or an override.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Kristen?
I think Nancy and Daveline were before me. Do you want?
Okay, Nancy?
I just wanted to say that while in theory, I support what Bob is saying, I also feel like I agree with Tom and I assume Michelle's thoughts on this, that, for as long as we've had this fund balance growing at the rate that it's been growing, the citizens have been told that it was to offset the tax impact of doing foster. And now I think in the last 2 years, they've thrown in the public safety facility. But so I'm kind of conflicted on using it for a purpose that would be outside what the expectation has been set. But I also want to come back to what Caitlin just said. I personally, and I guess I just have to wrap my head around it. Do we have to go and formalize that, or can we just better educate? Like, I think that chart that Michelle just showed paints, that paints a pretty good picture in crystallizing in people's minds how it's going to be used and how that impact is really related to the taxes that they're going to pay. And do we really have to do something so formal that if there were another emergency, that we would have to go to town meeting to back out of? It's where are we threading the needle on that, I guess?
I agree with you, and I would just point out that we are planning, if we were to do that, it wouldn't come up until the fall. So no matter, regardless, it's not before us this spring. But I threw it out there because I thought that's what the community would have liked to have seen. But I hear the both sides of this discussion. Yeah.
It's not easy, yeah.
Javeline?
Oh, first, just to follow up on that point, it seems to me it's also important to remember in terms of those unexpected things that might happen, like, I mean, God forbid another pandemic, but if we're planning to be at that 20%, our policy, then we still have 4% below that. So there's still money, if you will, to draw on. I just wanted to say I'm appreciative of using some of this for large capital projects that not so large like Foster School, but like the fire department or the tennis courts or these things that they just simply can't be funded out of capital outlay because they are the entire budget or more. And so it's just really good to have a sort of a fund that you can draw on occasionally. And so one of the things I would say in terms of what money is remaining over time, because if we assume fund balance will continue to grow, which as it has in the last few years, then that gives an opportunity for when there's a lot of police vehicles to be purchased or there's some major building renovation to take place, not so major as millions of dollars, but $1 million, for example, that there's money to use that for capital. So I think that's really a good idea. And I actually think committing to how you would use this in the future for foster and the public safety I actually am supportive of that, because I think I'm going to be careful. I don't think our citizens always trust what we say we will do. And so I think the transparency of making the commitment can be important. That's all. Thank you.
As the target of some of that lack of trust over the years, I can assure you I feel that sometimes as well. And it's never meant to be whatever personal. It's just I do get that sense sometimes, and that's why I had the idea. That's why we had the idea.
Yeah, and I think sometimes it's just people aren't in the weeds on all of this as much as we are, so they don't they have a different view.
Kristen?
I just have a question about capital outlay and how money is, assigned to that, and they have to go through the process of who gets what every year. And there's always a large amount that people don't get. Why is fund balance not used for those projects?
So we could, we tend to save fund balance for large capital projects that are just outside of the scope of that. Some of like this $900,000 for the tennis courts or 2.2 million for the fire. We did have this conversation this morning that, listen, it's a $2.7 million annual capital outlay budget that probably ought to be $5 million. And that's the reality, Kristen. You're absolutely right. It's just, it would be within town the financial policy to use it in that way. I think that if we do that, we are traditionally anyway, at least since I've been here, I've seen folks wanting to use it more on the larger capital projects that are just outside of the scope of capital outlay. But listen, for the last 3 years, many of you in this board have heard me refer to the capital budget as a structural deficit. It's a increasing problem every year. Michelle and I and Sue have had several conversations about trying to find ways to augment that budget this year, and we may have found one. We got to work on it a little bit, but it seems like every year we're trying to find a way to scrap another little bit so we can get another known necessary project. Listen, capital outlay has an extraordinarily difficult job to do, and we recognize that. And then, frankly, until we get more funds, and this is what Michelle and I were talking about early this morning, the town needs more money. It needs to build the pie, not necessarily continue to juggle the slices of the pie that of the size we have. but there's just not enough money to do the things that that the services the town provides require. And that's the uncomfortable truth.
And I will
So
just
that-
add to that the fire article and the tennis courts article is that doing that. That
Yeah.
all of those requests came through capital outlay. We knew there was no way to fund them through there, and that's why we at least put the fire forward and the school put the tennis courts forward.
And can I add just one more thing, Kristen, on your point? Many years ago, we were using fund balance for capital outlay. And we got dinged by the rating agencies that we should not be using fund balance for reoccurring capital outlay. So that's why we got away from doing it, using fund balance for capital.
Andy?
The fund balance, the unassigned fund balance is primarily, and Sue will check me if I'm wrong, the result of revenue surplus and budget surplus. And revenue surplus is the difference between what the town actually receives in revenue and what it estimated it would receive when it was doing the budget process.
Okay,
Right.
that's total fund balance, Andy, not unassigned.
Okay, total fund balance. And that revenue surplus from 2011 through 2021 averages 1.756 million a year. And in 5 of those years, at least, it was in excess of $2 million. The other significant component is the budget surplus. And from 2010 to 2021, that has averaged 1.9 million. So between the revenue surplus and the budget surplus, each year the fund balance receives on average $3.7 million. That's going back 11 or 12 years. So it's a fairly stable, I would suggest, and predictable number. It's a significant number to me that as a result of budgeting process, $3.7 million can be put into a reserve. And I think we should be cognizant of that money and cognizant of its source. In one sense, it's a bit of an equity issue. You know, when the town votes in 2019 for a particular budget and assumes a particular number in terms of anticipated revenue, people don't expect, I would assume, that a lot of that money in relative terms will go into a fund that they may never see the benefit of. And I guess I'm very close to saying that while we classify the money that goes into the fund balance as one-time funds, that's not, I don't think, entirely accurate. I mean, it's true that there is not a predictable, reliable, I shouldn't say predictable, there's not a targeted funding source from those. But history tells us that there is a predictable amount that goes into fund balance each year. I think there's some obligation on the equity side to use excess fund balance for sure, as near as possible to the years in which the taxes that created that reserve were paid. Now, that's not to say I'm undervaluing the need for a reserve rainy day fund, but I do think that there is that equity issue. I do think there is this predictability such that to view fund balance as one-time money, as I say, is understandable from the underwriter's perspective, but not entirely accurate from an historical perspective. So I wouldn't be too, I guess, where am I going with this? I guess I'm going to the point where I would recommend being fairly aggressive in spending excess fund balance for sure sooner rather than later. And I think that's about all I have to say on the matter, because if I say what I really want to say.
George?
Thanks, Julia. Andy, what comes to mind is don't count your chickens before they come home to roost, or whatever it is that saying is. I mean, we may have enjoyed favorable increases in fund balance over the last few years. But there is a chart, and I was looking for it and couldn't put my hands on it, but which does show a sort of an up and down over the last few years. And I think if memory serves me correctly, back in 2008, 2009, we really had some difficulties in borrowing money because of the size of our fund balance and our financial policy and that sort of thing. So while it looks like the pot is forever being
the 2009
replenished
recession,
and the
George.
grass is always greener on the other side, it may not be always there. And so I would certainly argue on the side of caution. I think the approach, and I congratulate Tom and Michelle and Sue, I think the approach is a thoughtful one that reflects a lot of the things that we have heard recently, certainly, and even going into the past. Citizens and this committee have looked at the growing fund balance and said, we need to start using some of it. And this proposal, and it is a proposal at this point, certainly looks to use some significant amounts of that excess fund balance in really meaningful and targeted ways. The impact to citizens is very apparent when they see a new fire truck going down the street and they see the leaky roofs at the fire stations being repaired and some other necessary things being taken care of. And when they get to go to the tennis courts and use the tennis courts, those are tangible things that people can say, yeah, this is my taxes at work, and I appreciate that. On the other hand, as long as I've been on this committee, and I'm now in year 5, I've been told that we're building a fund balance for the day when we have large-scale capital project needs like Foster and now the public safety building, and we're going to be using some of this excess fund balance to mitigate the immediate impact on the taxpayer, and I think that's a good thing. We're asking the taxpayers. I mean, you saw the increase in taxes projected, and that's not factoring in an override. So relief that we can provide to taxpayers in the future, and maybe it is, 3, 4, 5 years down the road, but it's a promise to them that when these tax bills really start to go up, we've had the foresight to say, we've got some money tucked aside and it's going to help you through a couple of years. It's not a forever thing, but it will help you get through the first couple of years. So I think it's a good proposal, and I think it's one that certainly deserves serious consideration.
Thanks, George. Dave?
Thanks. And George said much of my thoughts. I'm grateful for Tom and Michelle, your work on this. And I guess the only thing I wrestle with, I think Dave Lane put it best a couple nights ago, where she said, the notion that you would ask for an operating override when you've got a 30% fund balance seems inconsistent. And I think that's a really good point. So I'm very much in favor of trying to make sure we use that resource before we ask for more. Having said that, I guess I just need to spend some time thinking about, it's more of a political than a finance question, and maybe none of us were elected, so maybe we don't have to worry about that so much. But I think about, like, how well does a town meeting voter calculate in 2022 or the fall of 2022 the benefit of a tax savings on an excluded debt issue in 2026, 2027, and 2028? I mean, that graph is powerful. I think all of us have been haunted by that graph for the last few weeks or months, depending on when you first saw it. So I don't have an answer. I guess I just wanted to make that comment, which is that I hope that we're always looking at the, at the risk of using a finance term, like looking at the greatest present value benefit to the taxpayer, as opposed to the greatest dollar value benefit to the taxpayer. And I know, Michelle and Tom are thinking about that all the time too. So I just throw that out there as a thought, because absolutely this money should be used. I just want to see it used with the highest and best use for the taxpayer. And this may very well be it, but I always am kind of amazed at the short-sightedness of people, myself included, and I worry that the benefits to accrue in 5 to 7 years will be less than they'll be appreciated then, but how much will they be appreciated now? And will there be frustration a year from now if we're asking for an override and we've set what would that be? $7 million away towards for 4 or 5 years down the road. So, like I said, I don't think there's an answer. It's more of a thought. But thank you guys for the hard work on this.
No problem, Dave. I would like Julie, do you mind if I jump in?
Please.
Dave, just your thoughts again, as always, are very thoughtful. I think that Michelle and Sue and I talked at length about all of this, and I think that one of the things we're looking forward to, we did run this through the Janet Morley prism. She's just so good at this stuff, and we're anticipating. We got some early feedback that was very positive. We are hoping to get a bit more detailed report back from her here in the coming days. But we absolutely listen. We don't have all the answers either. We work hard to try to determine, to evaluate all the different scenarios and the appropriate uses. We talk to a lot of very smart people. Thankfully, this town is full of them. So we try not to come to these conclusions in a vacuum and bring the right brains to task as well. So please understand that this is not just me twisting my mustache in the basement of my house alone. So,
your fake mustache, apparently.
Yeah, that's right. Right.
No, and believe me, please don't take it that way, because that wasn't.
No, I don't. You know what I mean? Yeah.
I'm literally just saying, like, I almost feel like some of us have looked at this for so long and so hard that we keep going down the same paths because they're familiar, and I just throw it out there as a thought. That's all.
Yeah. No. I said that just because I just wanted. It occurred to me that I didn't mention earlier that there's a whole group of people that in this kind of conversation is also extraordinarily helpful. It's a lot of brains at work here for sure.
And I'd like to add that Janet Morley is one of our town's financial advisors. She works for, just to remind, she wasn't able to come to our presentation in the fall when we had the discussion about the bond rating, but she was going to come and she couldn't last minute, but she's one of the team, including Richard Tortoro. So it's her job to look at our finances and make recommendations or help us make decisions. So. Sarah?
Thanks. Just quickly, and kind of going on Dave's point about using the funds in a tangible way that voters can appreciate more immediately. I'm wondering, is it possible to split the baby a little bit on the pool? And I realize that won't take us out of the borrowing category where we need a 2/3 vote. But, if we were to say, looking at, and thank you, Tom, for explaining the leftover $2 million, because that was my initial question.
Right.
But, if we were to take this presentation and say, $2 million extra dollars toward the pool, I think a lot of us were a little frustrated, or some of us, me, by that CPC didn't give the full amount to the pool. can we use some money toward the pool and maybe contemplate a $5 million bucket toward the debt reduction in the future for future projects, knowing that, or hope, being optimistic that there will be increased fund balance in the future, that we could possibly increase that amount. I mean, if we vote in the fall for $5 million for that purpose, we could add to that in a future town meeting if the fund balance increases by more than we expected. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah. It's just a thought as to maybe a way to assist with the pool a little more, take on a little less debt, even though we still would be in the borrowing category at town meeting.
Yeah, thank you, Sarah, for the thought. That was another scenario that I know was bandied about several times, and as recently as this afternoon. The thought was, right or wrong, not, the thought was it didn't change anything, like you said. It's still the pool is still going to need to be a borrowing. It's still going to need to get a 2/3 vote. It's still going to, all of those thresholds were still going to have to have been met. And in the end, we were lessening our ability to do the way I see it is the way I see the need, the appropriateness of using that large amount of excess fund balance on those two projects is because that's what I believe the town had always been told. And that's why I was doing that. So instead of trying to whittle some of that down and give it to a project and not really changing the end result of the way things were going to have to play out, it felt like it was more appropriate to allocate it to Foster and the public safety facility. But these are the conversations I think Michelle Sue and I were really hoping to hear tonight. So
thanks so much.
Yeah.
I'm going to go with Evan. We haven't heard from him yet.
I want to thank you guys for putting this together. I like the kind of creativeness of the thinking. And Tom, I'm going to compliment you on saying, our problem is we don't have enough revenue to sustain all the services we have in town. And I think you said it's uncomfortable. It may be for some, it's just the fact. I mean, and I applaud you guys for kind of looking at it that way. I love where Sarah and Bob were going, and I look at it and say, if we could, plan or kind of cover costs on a couple of these bigger projects. I don't know if it's the pool and the seawalls, or, take a couple of things together where you actually take care of the entire cost of the project outright. Because no matter what, we'll be borrowing and chipping away at kind of partial things and still having to borrow. It helps some, but actually having people see that you take care of a couple of entire efforts all at once, and then are committed to doing the borrowing. Because if I look at that graph and it is quite striking, there will be other things that will come up too that will add to that, because we'll need to do other things. So there's been enough kind of deferred maintenance around some things around town that it's we're going to need to be open to understanding we may need to do more. So just long way around to saying, love all the work that you guys did, love the creativity. But I do think if we could take away, a couple of these, just take them off the table because we can afford to pay for them, that would be pretty amazing.
Great, thank you.
Andy?
Yeah, I think in large measure, we should take instruction from our financial advisors, because it's difficult to know how the rating agencies are going to react. I'm a proponent of aggressive use of the unassigned fund balances right now, but I'm looking at a document that says in September of 2007, Hingham was given a AAA rating on a $6.5 million bond issue. And at that time, the town's position was deemed to be strong, and noted the fiscal 06 unreserved general fund balance equaled $9 million, or 12.8% of expenditures, transfers out, and other uses. Hingham's fiscal 2008 budget increased a modest 5.6% over fiscal 2007, with labor costs representing 69% of operating expenditures. We had a reduced percentage in the financial policy, that is percentage of by which the unassigned balance should, what percentage of TAE the unassigned fund balance should be. And Sue, maybe you can help me, was, I don't know, 12 to 14% back in 2010, maybe, when you started?
I don't know off the top of my head, Andy.
Okay. But it has been increased in the past 10 years. I think that's fair to say, correct?
Yes, the financial policy has changed. Yes.
And so that's why, you know, I don't know what number makes sense. The rating agent, the people, the financial advisors who have one ear to the ground with regard to rating agencies will be the ones who will tell us that. I'm always a little, an independent financial advisor could give us very good advice. Obviously, if you're an underwriter, you would prefer that there be unassigned fund balance of 50% of any borrowing, but you know, that's obviously in their interest, but not ours. We should not be, I mean, I think 20%, I'm surprised to hear, Sue, that you said that some agencies are now talking about a 30% fund balance. I mean, I would have suspected that 20% was a pretty healthy number, but again, come back to my original point. I very much recommend the advice of the financial advisors because they have access to the capital fund markets, thinking better than certainly than I do. That being said, I want to join everyone else in praising and thanking Tom and Michelle for putting this package together. It's impressive work and much appreciated.
And Sue, just throwing it in there.
Well, you know, Sue, I assume, is pulling the puppet strings on all financial matters. So it seems so repetitive to thank her, but I'm happy to do so.
All right, thanks, Andy. Matt?
So I was just going to observe that I think a lot of the rating agencies and their methods for rating debt aren't subjective, they're quantitative. I thought that session we had months ago was really, really helpful when you think about town finances and the fund balance and the things we're talking about. From what I can tell from reading through some of the stuff on Moody's and Fitch and S&P, it's about a 30% weight. Fund balance as a percentage of revenues, not expenditures, is about 10% of the town's rating. So we get AAA on that single metric, which is a 10% weight in our overall credit rating. Right. What I'm trying to understand is it seems like a bigger contribution is the 5-year trend, and I wasn't aware of that. So showing that you're continuing to add to fund balance is how I read this, is an equally, if not more important metric for the rating of the town. And on those metrics, it seems like, if I'm reading this correctly, we're not actually as high as I would think. So while it feels like we're piling on, that's actually the metric where we don't look as strong. It's not the dollar amount is incredibly high. It's over 30%. That's great. I don't think we need to go a dime over 30%, but it's actually the rate of change is not as high as I would have guessed relative to what rating agencies are looking for. And I just wanted to test that with Tom and Michelle and Sue. Is that understanding correct?
I think it overall is, from, especially if you're reading it from a general category or in a general sense from what the rating agencies look for. We did actually have a very good conversation with Janet this afternoon about some of this, and what she told us. Well, a couple of things. The entire scoring system that they use is very heavily weighted over the entirety of the community's wealth, the community's entire wealth, and therein is where we frankly become a very strong AAA community, just in that metric alone. That said, what I think Janet or Richard told us a couple of months ago, and Janet reiterated with Michelle, Sue and I this afternoon, was that as long as we were living within our financial policy, and what, to the extent we used excess fund balance, we were using it to improve our infrastructure. Those are things that the rating agencies really wanted to see, that we're trusting our management. We're looking at 16 to 20% is in our financial policy. It's a reasonable number. You're right, it is lower than what Richard told us was the norm that they look for of 30%. But couple that it is in our financial policy, we're able to meet it and often exceed it, and couple that with the larger scoring system where we are so strong. It wasn't a problem to keep our percentages at 16 to 20, but that we should not be regularly falling below 20.
And I think just one step further though, if you reduced it to whatever it is, 30% or 20%, and then flatlined it for 5 years, my understanding is that's actually a bad thing. Like you need to be.
So that was not what that was showing. Michelle, do you want to?
What the?
Yeah, so I think what you just saw, you mean on the graph tonight, Matt?
No, I was just looking up my own kind of research on the factors for credit ratings. The point was just like the 5-year trend and the direction of the trend is equally as important as the actual level. So right now we're sitting and saying, hey, we have a lot of cash.
Right, I see.
Let's use it. But if you use that cash and then you don't replenish it 5 years out, 5 years, that is kind of the worst scenario. It sounds like we have a lot of cash, but it's actually the trend that rating agencies look at just as much.
The trending does matter, but the trending definitely matters. But Janet stressed that as long as you're using it according to your policies and you're reinvesting in your infrastructure, then they're comfortable if you're not trending the way their optimum charts would request.
Got it. Okay, thanks.
You're welcome.
I have a question about the harbor walls, the wharf walls, and whether this kind of project would be something that we could use the new buckets of federal money that it's the reimbursable for projects that say, for example, infrastructure.
You have to ask the question, right, Julie? Are we going to be able to use Ouija money or not?
Yeah, sorry. I know. I was it IIJA, and Tom, you like to call it Ouija.
Gonna have your fingers on it and follow the evil spirits. Yes, I don't know. I think that they would be available for portions of it. The guidance is still coming out on the use of those funds. So as we understand that guidance more, we'll certainly use it appropriately. But that is what it was intended for, was large infrastructure projects. So I would expect that it would be.
Okay. Does anyone have any other questions or comments or feedback? Well, this has been a great discussion. Thank you for coming tonight,
you're welcome.
Tom, Michelle, and for giving us this very useful list. And it's good fodder for our thoughts as we move forward in the next couple of weeks.
I expect to be summoned regularly. Great.
Right,
Thank you, everybody.
you.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.
And
Good night, Tom boy.
for advisory committee, we just have a couple of the quick things, and then we'll wrap it for the night. I had on here liaison updates for capital outlay and ACEs. I'm not sure if you want to give those liaison updates, but
we met last night. We're still in process. One thing I will say for people who are new, we categorize the requests by annual. There's annual every year, which is kind of replenishing certain things like furniture in the library, things like that. And then there's priorities. Priority 1, we try to fund all of the things that we identify as priority 1. And we look at things as, is it a safety risk? Is it core to the mission? Is it broken? Things like that. Or is it costing more to repair it than it would to replace it? And so those are the things we look at. We try to, as I said, fund priorities 1, and the annual expenses. We usually don't get to our 2s or 3s, but that's how we allocate them. And we have, we're down to, I think we have about $500,000 yet to allocate. And I think we have about $1.5 million left in requests. So we'll meet again next Wednesday and hopefully be able to finalize our decisions. So.
All right. Thank you for all the time that you and Matt are putting in on these meetings and deliberations. We appreciate it. ACEs, Dave, do you have anything to update us on?
Yeah, I'll be quick. I don't know if anybody had a chance to see it. A number of people did, I think, on Monday when Dr. Jamie LaBillois gave his update on student progress. I would encourage you to watch it if you're interested. It was kind of a roll forward from a year ago of the data. And the good news is that students, it was largely focused on elementary school data and the data they have mid-year. But the good news is that the students almost uniformly across the board in elementary schools are ahead of where they were a year ago. So this year's first graders are ahead of where last year's first graders were. But even so, this year's first graders are not where the average first grader was pre-pandemic. So while there's improvement, there's still work to do. And the other data showed that also. So that's the super high level summary. But I think in broad strokes, at least from my perspective, certainly anybody else on ACES could speak if they have a different view, but it affirms the decision to add the resources on the elementary school level in particular. And I think on the special ed level, as we saw with higher special ed referrals as well. So we've asked and had good conversations with the school committee and asked them directly, have you seen the impact that you expected or anticipated in the additions of resources from last year? And the answer has been yes, that they have, but they have more work to do. So I think by and large, that's good news. And I think we should all feel good about the fact that the students are progressing and hopefully starting to dig out of this hole. The only other top line things I think to mention is that there is the state, I think, as you've seen, Governor Baker changed the mask policy with respect to schools. He's dropping a statewide mask mandate effective February 28th for schools in the Commonwealth. That doesn't require a district to do it. It gives the district the option to do it, provided that the school building meets certain vaccination requirements. So the school committee had a number of parents attending on Monday, and there will be a meeting on Friday at 4 o'clock on Zoom, where the school committee may take a vote as to how to act in the face of Governor Baker's change of position. So that, I think, as anybody who has kids in schools know these days, that has been a hot topic for students and teachers and parents alike. So
Dave, that's tomorrow, Friday, not a week from Friday.
God, is tomorrow Friday already? Yes, tomorrow
Yeah,
Friday.
okay, cool.
4 o'clock.
Thanks.
Yes.
Thanks.
And we go 2 more hours, it'll be Friday.
so it's now.
Yeah.
Great.
In that case, I'll do a small reading right now, and I'm sure I can get us to Friday.
I
think that's it for ACES.
We want to beat Tuesday night's record. Just kidding. Never. Okay, thanks, Dave. So I had a good chat with Bob today. He brought up a really good point about our warrant articles, about how we have in the comment where it's indicated the boards who have voted, and usually it says the select board voted unanimously. And so I didn't give the clearest information about vote count for the advisory committee, and he had suggestion. What we've been doing in the past, we should do this year, is that if AdCom votes unanimously, then that sentence at the end of the comment should just include the select board voted unanimously and the advisory committee was unanimous, not give the advisory committee vote, unless if there was a minority vote, if someone dissented, then you would say, the vote count was 11-3 or whatever that vote count was. So I just wanted to give that clarification. I'm sorry if I was confusing before about that, but it's just cleaner that way. And it also explains why some nights AdCom vote count is, if you had the vote count all the time, some nights it's 10-0, other nights it's 13-0. It's just confusing.
That's my question. So 10-0 or 13-0, it still counts as unanimous?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thanks.
Yeah. So if you could.
And where do abstentions fall into that?
then that would, the same thing, that if you have anything other than unanimous and, you know, a 0 after the count, then you would put in, you would record that there would be an abstention. So 10,
0.
0,
Yeah, we don't, Juliet, that's, wasn't the practice last year?
Yeah.
If it's,
Really?
I'm sorry, the practice is that everyone who is eligible to vote either votes unanimously or not. So the only time you would say it's not unanimous is if someone actively voted against it. Or if everyone voted against it and one person voted for it. But and abstention, the same thing as they're not there in the room.
I thought I've seen abstentions noted in previous warrant articles when I was going through, Julie, some of the stuff you know.
Not last
Yep.
year.
I don't think. we-
Not well.
I went back and looked over the last, I think, 3 years. Because I was having to put in a vote count number for Article M. And so I started to think about this, but we've generally just said the Board of Selectmen and the Advisory Committee voted unanimously in support of this article. It doesn't make any sense to say anything about abstentions. And when you think about the kind of questions you get from the floor of town meeting, you know, people always want to know why somebody voted against something. And likewise, they may want to know, well, why did somebody abstain? And it just brings town meeting down rabbit holes that we don't need to go into. And it's not really a transparency issue because the numbers and abstentions are all reported in our minutes. So
And in
I
the
would
WASP,
suggest,
which is on the website.
yeah, I would suggest we just follow past practice. And if everybody voted for, it's unanimous, even if it's 8-0 or 14-0. And when there are minorities, then clearly people need to know that there was a minority and what the minority position is. And I'll also note that our AdCom policies give somebody that wasn't present and didn't have an opportunity to vote against to ask for reconsideration at the next meeting or ask to be recorded in opposition at the next meeting. So in some ways, when that doesn't happen, it's almost implicit that there is no opposition. And that's kind of what I mentioned to Julie this afternoon. So I'll leave it there. It's getting late.
Is everyone clear on this for this year? Thank you. Sorry about that. So discussion of advisory committee housekeeping items. The schedule for upcoming meetings. I'm not going to bury the lead. AdCom will not meet during school vacation week. We will not meet on the 22nd. We are not meeting on the 24th. So enjoy the week off, get some rest, regroup. But please also work on your articles and get them going because we are going to be hitting the ground running on March 1st. And I'm going to tell you that we have a very busy stretch of at least 3 weeks of 2 times a week to get through all the rest of the warrant articles and the budget. So I enjoy the week off. And
Our next meeting
Tuesday-
is March 1st.
No, what I'm saying is that after we have the break week, we will be meeting again on March 1st. But I'm
All right, well,
talking
when,
now.
I don't know. When is
Nice
school
try.
vacation week?
Our
said
next meeting is next
I said the
Tuesday.
22nd and the 24th of February. We are not meeting on those 2 dates, but we
Okay.
are meeting 2 days next week. We are meeting next Tuesday. We have a visit from the fire chief to go over Article T, plus a vote to repurpose some capital previously assigned to the fire department. And we are also going to have Article N, which is the community preservation projects. And then on Thursday, we're going to have foster school, and we may be voting on the pool article on that night as well. So that's the schedule. Any questions about upcoming meetings? Okay, matters not anticipated within 48 hours of meeting. Okay, can I have a motion to adjourn?
Move to adjourn.
Second.
Bob,
Aye.
George,
Aye.
Nancy,
Aye.
Dave.
Aye.
Evan.
Aye, sorry.
Evan is,
Sorry, aye.
yeah. Andy,
Aye.
Daveline,
Aye.
Brenda,
Aye.
Aye. I don't know if you said my name.
Matt. Oh, sorry.
Aye.
Matt. I'm tired. Caitlin,
Aye.
Sarah.
Aye.